the last time that I checked. Now before I digress, my girl, you told me that I'm not your love interest. See my girl, the last time that I checked, see nothing ain't changed yet, except that I got a big bag and a big flag. Don't make nobody tell me nonsense, my nigga. Streets is so cold, my nigga. May nobody come try cry me a river. I'ma pull through like the strings on my guitar. Nonsense, my nigga. The streets is so cold, my nigga. May nobody come try cry me a river. I'ma pull through like the strings on my guitar.
It's so cold outside, my brother. I don't want pull no trigger. I just want live, cause I'm going place. I don't want no wahala. It's so cold outside, my brother. I know the hate, no brother. Me, I just want live, cause I'm going places. I don't want no wahala. Oh, it's so cold outside. Me, I know they let nothing to worry me. I know they let nothing to bother me. Me no owe no one apology. You know say she look. Me, I know they let nothing to bother me. I know they let nothing to bother me. Me no owe no one apology. Do you get me?
May nobody tell me nonsense, my nigga. Streets is so cold, my nigga. May nobody come try cry me a river. I'ma pull through like the strings on my guitar. Nonsense, my nigga. The streets is so cold, my nigga. May nobody come try cry me a river. I'ma pull through like the strings on my guitar.
It's so cold outside, my brother. I don't want pull no trigger. I just want live, cause I'm going place. I don't want no wahala. It's so cold outside, my brother. Me, I know the hate on no brother. Me, I just want live, cause I'm going places. I don't want no wahala. Oh, it's so cold outside. Me, I know they let nothing to worry me. I know they let nothing to bother me. Me no owe no one apology. You know say she no they bother nobody. Me, I know they let nothing to bother me. I know they let nothing to bother me. Me no owe no one apology. Do you get me? It's so cold outside.
Tune in and turn up the volume. This is Channel Africa.
Impossible.
Yo yalla le namane ko banga sayar mande atona jekal malima ya lima gente mande ya de buria up dole ya sama bolo ya nyu bole mo I'm a hill if you're like a ya mejo ya vichito ya fi muche ya nyu yo de ya fe sayar mande ma ye I do dirty salad sutural mo best mo malak tonye yore ke di bobi fetele chingorge polek mo minefi puro janta kwerbe yore ke di bobi fetele chingorge polek mo minefi puro janta kwerbe no dogol bagana solo neke nena fo ma tek teguna fogam nane jabu bul musirat taxawe bes bu jam ñe buditi sama xol bi dina sédé bëggoon naa yow nent bi fonkoon naa ñi ma mag daana bokko li ma am daan yeesal ca waxtu ba donte xam naa ma tuba yërëmoon naa gone lool donte dama bari tooñ ate ma sa yërmande ndax dama laa réere woon ma fonko waxtu duma nitu leer yàlla bu ma reba deeti bu sirata xawee bés bu jam ñe bu diti sama xol bi dina seede bëggoon naa yoo nent bee duma nit ku baax dinaa jéem a fonko waxtu duma nitu leer Yalla bu ma rëy ba dee ci bu siraat taxawee bés bu jaam ñépp di tiit sama xol bi dina seede bëggoon naa yonent bi.
It's 6 o'clock Central African time. A very good morning to you and welcome to Rise and Shine on this Tuesday. It's the 7th of October and thank you for choosing Channel Africa as your source of news from the African perspective. We are together as Rise and Shine with you till 9 this morning. My name is Asanda, Beda, and great to have my partner with me in studio after being ill.
Man,
how are you feeling?
Do you know what? I think I'm about 95%, but yeah, these change of seasons, I think they often come with their own things, but I'm feeling better. Glad to be back in the studio. But I was listening from home in bed, and you guys were great, as usual.
We're glad to have you back.
No, so good to be back. And thanks for tuning in to Rise and Shine every single morning. And today we'll be taking a look at a number of things. But you may know that today, October the 7th, is the day 2 years ago, 2023, when Hamas militants attacked Israel and more than 1,000 people, was it 1,000? Yeah, 100,000, can't remember now. My goodness, 2 years ago, were killed, sadly. And the onslaught since then by the Israeli government to try and completely destroy Hamas has meant lots of innocent lives have been lost as well. In the aftermath. We'll be unpacking that and other stories across the continent as well, right here on Rise and Shine. But first, let's say a very good morning to our person on the news, and that's Onele Nsinsi. Good morning.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Well, good morning, Peter, and a very good morning to our listeners. Madagascar's President Andry Rajoelina has named Army General Rufine Fortunate Zami-Sambo as a Prime Minister. This is a week after dissolving the government in response to ongoing protests over power and water shortages. Zafi-Sambo replaces Prime Minister Christian Say, who was dismissed as part of the president's move. The general was the director of the military cabinet in the Prime Minister's office until this appointment. Ahead of naming him, Rajoelina said the country needed a prime minister capable of restoring order and the people's trust. Earlier yesterday, protesters returned to the streets in the African island nation for a third week of anti-government demonstrations. The family of South Africa's ambassador to France, Nathi Mthethwa, who died after falling from the 22nd floor of a hotel in Paris last week, say they are hoping to bury him this coming Sunday. Mthethwa died at the age of 58. The family says the date is subject to change pending the finalization of the repatriation process in France. Addressing the media at the family homestead in Kwambonambi in the north coast of the KwaZulu-Natal province, Mthethwa's brother, Kulegani.
There are still too many unanswered questions, but we are focusing on a way forward. They are now focusing on how and when his remains will be brought back. Our plan is to bury him in a dignified manner. We are still waiting for the full report about his death. We were promised that he would be repatriated back home this week. That is why, as a family, we planned this Sunday. But of course, that will be based on whether there are any changes.
Tanzanian opposition leader Tundu Lissu has gone on trial for treason in the capital Dar es Salaam. This comes weeks before the East African country holds an election that his party has been barred from contesting. Lissu, who came second in the presidential poll in 2020, was arrested in April and charged with treason over what prosecutors said was a speech calling on the public to rebel and disrupt the elections later this month. He has pleaded not guilty in the treason case, and his lawyer has said the charges are politically motivated. Uganda has called on world leaders to place disability inclusion at the center of their discussions. Minister of State for Disability Affairs, Asama Helen Grace, said this should be on the agenda of the upcoming G20 summit of heads of states to be held in Johannesburg, South Africa. Helen Grace spoke to Channel Africa at the 4-day South Africa-Uganda Disability Inclusion Study Tour in Pretoria.
No, I think for me, what I call upon the leaders, South Africa being the leader in G20, is that whenever they discuss issues, they should think about people with disabilities in the agenda. Because you can't do all those things of sustainability when you have left a whole population of disabled people out in Africa. And then in the whole G20, I think South Africa could lead to bring our inclusion into the program so that once or the other time, we also have a presentation of people with disabilities in that agenda. That will be the best thing they can do for us.
Lastly, the head of the UN Agency for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, says bowing down to pressure to reform the Convention on Asylum will be a catastrophic error. U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to call for restricting the right to asylum at the UN later this month. The BBC's Mimi Swabi.
It's a critical time for the UNHCR. Funding has been slashed, and the principle of asylum is more divisive than ever. US officials have urged other nations to join their campaign to roll back asylum protections, frameworks dating back to after the Second World War. They say migrants should seek asylum in the first country they enter. As conflicts around the globe continue to drive displacement, the UN Agency for Refugees faces the most severe budget cuts in its history, a 25% funding reduction. Addressing an annual meeting, Mr. Grandi blamed devastating donor cuts, as many Western powers prioritise defence spending over aid.
Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Tsinsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, CAF returns to profitability as well as strong financial growth and increased investment, while Tasman Brits century helps the South African side to a 7-wicket victory over New Zealand in the ODI cricket. Details coming up at 6:30.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Every day after the 6 o'clock news, we try to give you a concise look at some of the top stories and events that played out in the last 24 hours. And that's to catch you up and start your news day all caught up. And we do this with our team of journalists and correspondents across the continent and beyond, making sense of all of those news stories. And we begin with this. A peace deal between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo has suffered a setback. And this after both sides failed to agree on key economic terms. The US brokered agreement had been seen as a major step towards ending years of instability in eastern DRC, with hopes that it would open the door to billions of dollars in investment and revitalize cross-border trade. Chris Ochamringo reports from Kinshasa.
U.S. officials hosted their counterparts from Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo to discuss the final text of a regional economic integration framework meant to bring the two rival countries closer to establishing lasting peace along their shared border. According to an official who declined to be quoted, the final text was not signed by both parties because the DRC demanded that Rwanda first withdraw 90% of its troops from its territory in the country's east. The economic cooperation is part of a U.S. brokered peace deal that the foreign ministers of Rwanda and the DRC signed in Washington, D.C. on June 27th. It seeks to end the M23 rebellion in eastern Congo.
The South Africans detained in Israel after taking part in the global Sumud flotilla are expected to be released and flown home today. 6 South Africans were among dozens of activists held after Israeli naval forces intercepted the flotilla's boats last week. Crispin Piri, spokesperson for the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, has more.
This information has been extended to us through the Israeli authorities, who have confirmed to us in writing. And Minister Lavula has thanked everyone involved in these processes to ensure that the South Africans are able to return back to South Africa safely. From here, they will be handed over to our authorities in Jordan, where they will then facilitate for them to fly back to South Africa. We are still finalizing the final arrangements, the logistical arrangements, crossing the I's and dotting the T's. But we do believe that they should be home at the very least by Thursday, if it really takes really, really long. But
protesters have taken to the streets of Madagascar's major cities for a third consecutive week, escalating calls for President André Rajoelina to step down. In the capital, Antananarivo, police fired tear gas to disperse demonstrators, many of them university students who'd turned rallies over persistent water and power cuts into a wider movement against the government. Wanolo Maribe has more.
Protests began in Madagascar in late September, initially triggered by water and electricity cuts. Inspired by youth movements in Kenya and Nepal and fueled by the power of social media, these demonstrations are the largest the island nation has faced in recent years. Since the protests began, the United Nations reported at least 22 people killed and more than 100 injured, figures the government has since denied. Although President André Rajoelina dissolved the government and briefly restored calm last week, protests have continued. Rajoelina responded to the unrest by saying that he was ready to listen and find solutions to problems facing the nation, but ignored calls for his resignation.
The second session of the Botswana-Namibia Binational Commission, or the BNC, opened in Windhoek on Monday. Botswana's Permanent Secretary for International Relations, Thuso Ramodimusi, urged that the BNC go beyond dialogue, delivering concrete outcomes for citizens rather than functioning as a mere discussion forum.
We should also strive to conclude negotiations on agreements, on outstanding agreements, thereby demonstrating our shared commitment and advancing our bilateral relations. I hope that MOUs, or several MOUs, will be finalized and signed during this BNC. Our deliberations here at the BNC must be aligned with the regional and global agendas to ensure that our bilateral cooperation contributes meaningfully to regional integration and the promotion of international peace and security.
The Permanent Secretary for International Relations, Thuso Ramodimusi, urged the BNC to go beyond dialogue, delivering concrete outcomes for citizens rather than functioning as a mere discussion forum. That was the story in Botswana. Let's go to Kenya now, East Africa, where President William Ruto has defended his leadership approach amid rising criticism that he micromanages senior government officials. Speaking at State House in Nairobi on Monday during the launch of retired Major Marsden Madoka's autobiography, Ruto rejected claims that he limits the independence of his cabinet ministers and principal secretaries.
Many a times I am accused of micromanaging staff. But you see, when you have reluctant people whose mentality it is, tumeona serikali nyingi, we've been here, we've seen many ministers, we've seen many presidents, because it is the business as usual stuff. It is the roll of the mill, normal stuff. And that is the reason why I have taken it upon myself in the last 3 years to raise the ambition of our country.
All right, so that's our look at what's been happening across the continent in the past 24 hours in our Africa Roundup. We'll have more for you tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., just after the 6 o'clock news. Coming up shortly, though, we're going to be focusing on what's been happening in East Africa. Asanda will be talking to Dennis Bweru.
Africa, meet Abedi.
Yeah, that's me.
Abedi is a music lover through and through.
I really love African music.
He's got a taste for all kinds of tunes and spends his days listening to Channel Africa. Guess what? He didn't know.
Okay.
Channel Africa wants to help Abedi and all music lovers everywhere to discover even more incredible music. That is why Channel Africa is calling on all African musicians to submit their music. Musicians, remember to give us all your relevant information. Make your submissions at music@channelafrica.co.za. Submissions are your chance to be heard on radio. But sadly, they do not guarantee that you will be playlisted. All submissions will be carefully reviewed to see if they meet our station's requirement. Channel Africa, the African perspective. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
15 minutes past 6 Central African time. On Rise and Shine, we now delve into the East Africa wrap. This will be some stories we touched earlier in our roundup wrap, but giving more detail as well as other stories that we need to get in the know of about this region of our continent, the East. We welcome Dennis Beru, who is a journalist and team leader at Grassroots Journalism in Kenya, who joins us on Tuesdays to unpack some of these stories. Dennis, how are you on this particular Tuesday?
Morning, Asanda. I'm well. Hope you are well.
I'm well, thank you so much. All right, let's go straight to it. And we start with Madagascar today. Protesters are calling for the stepping down or resignation of the president, Andry Rajoelina there. 22 people have been killed since these protests started back in 25th of September, these Gen Z protests. The president saying he won't step down.
Of course, Asanda, President Andry Rajoelina has ignored, of course, the calls to resign after a nationwide youth-led protest movement condemning what he perceived to be a coup plot driven by his rivals. Of course, protesters took to the streets of the capital of Antananarivo on Friday after a strategic pause in the near daily demonstration led by a movement known as the Gen Z, which of course they are now demanding for Rajoelina to resign over what they say as a failure to deliver the basic services that includes our provision of water and electricity. As per now, at least 22 people have been killed since the protest started in September 25th, according to the United Nations. And on Friday, of course, the police have fired tear gas to disperse marchers in the capital. And of course, we have seen the footage from Real TV, Madagascar, which has showed, of course, during the United Nations meeting in the US, of course, Rajoelina, of course, said that, of course, the Gen Z movement, it is driven by his opponents who want to topple his government. But of course, the Gen Z responded by rejecting his speech, saying that, of course, it was senseless, promising to take all necessary measures if President did not respond to favorably within 24 hours to listen to their demands.
So, I mean, he's saying that this is a plot to remove him from power. It's a coup, as he says it. But he then dissolves his government. How does that move make sense if he's claiming that this is a coup?
Of course, he did that after there were a lot of pressure from these young people. Of course, he thought it was a joke for the young people to go to the streets. But of course, when the protest escalated to the capital, Antananarivo, now he had to step in and ensure that, of course, by appointing the former general of the army to be the prime minister. But of course, they are still adamant. They say that, of course, our demands are very simple. We need water, we need electricity, because Antananarivo is one of the the Icelanders that we've seen, they have been having electricity and water connectivity issues recently. And this is the reason why, of course, these young people are now going to the street. And of course, the appointment of the new prime minister, of course, some say, of course, it is just they are trying to cool and ensure that, of course, the pressure goes down. But they are very adamant. We need you to address what we are demanding for.
Let's move to Tanzania now. The former ambassador to Cuba there has mysteriously disappeared. His brother is claiming that he's been abducted after the brother of this Humphrey Pole Pole went to his home and found that the house had been broken into and there was blood spilled. What can you tell us here?
Of course, Humphrey Pole Pole is a critic of the Mama Samia Suluhu's government. Of course, he is the former ambassador, and his whereabouts for now, it is still unknown. But of course, the Pole Pole's brother told the BBC that, of course, he was abducted on the early hours of Monday at his home in Dar es Salaam. Of course, the family had reported the matter after visiting the residence, and according to the Dar es Salaam's police chief, Jumanne Moliro, said that they're still following up on the response of the incident, but the police appeared to question the reported attack, and they had to respond to the reporters claiming that, of course, their former ambassador to Cuba recently he said that he was out of the country, but how now he has been abducted. But according to the National Police spokesman David Musime, of course, he has issued a statement confirming that they had seen the report online, and now the investigations have started. Of course, Pole Pole stepped down from his ambassadorial post earlier this year after publicly criticizing the government, but he stated that he no longer he want to be part of the administration that, in his views, of course, respects justice, the rule of law, and of course the constitutional principle. Because Asanda, now Tanzania will be heading to polls, and we've seen quite a number of abductions increase in the recent days, and of course the election will be coming up on 29th October. Of course, there is a lot of attention, and the former the opposition leader is in jail, and there is a lot of conversation going on in Tanzania, and people are asking, what is not really happening, because recently we've seen quite a number of abductions, both locals being abducted and of course the foreigners being abducted in Tanzania.
As you say, the police in this particular case of the former ambassador had said that this ambassador, Mr. Humphrey Pole Pole, is usually out of the country. So could he have even been in the house, was his question. Do you think that that's a way of delaying in investigations and making sure that they are urgently addressed?
Of course, Asanda, they are delaying the investigations, because the brother to Pole Pole, of course, went to the scene, and personally I've seen the videos circulating on social media, the pool of blood in the house, the door had been broken, and it is a contradiction from the government officials, because of course the family confirmed that, of course, Pole Pole was in Dar es Salaam and he has been in the country, but their report, of course, now it's now contradicting. So we are waiting to see further reports from, of course, government officials, the police, speed up the investigation, considering, of course, Pole Pole, he has been a very senior government official, of course, being ambassador in Cuba.
As you touched on, then also in Tanzania, the opposition leader there, Tundu Lissu, who has gone on trial yesterday, is back in court for treason. His party, the Chadema party, can't participate in elections later this month and is vowed to boycott the vote unless there are notable reforms in the electoral processes in the country. Well, has anything changed on that front?
Asanda, nothing has changed. Of course, the trial has started 3 weeks to the election. Of course, this is an election that, of course, people thought Tundu Lissu will be participating, but he was barred by the Electoral Commission from participating in the election. Of course, the entire Chadema party has been barred from participating, and of course. This comes at a time, of course, when the Tanzanian will be making or will be voting for their leaders. And as things looks like, of course, as I mentioned earlier, election is happening on 29th of October. The Chadema will not be in the picture. And of course, now the elephant in the room here, Tundu Lissu is facing treason-related charges. And of course, Lissu, who is now the opposition leader and or leads the Chadema party, he also survived 16 shots. Of course, he was shot 16 times in an assassination attempt in 2017. But since then, Asanda, we've never seen people brought to book. People have never been arrested for trying to kill Tundu Lissu. Of course, judges who are now handling this case are expected to hear the testimonies from the state witnesses. These according to the Chadema, and of course. According to the official of the party, they say, of course, the leader is firm, steadfast, and ready for the trial that is expected to take weeks. And probably after the elections, the trial will still go on.
Okay, let's move to Kenya now, your home country. The country is moving closer to formalizing cryptocurrency and digital asset regulation. How will this virtual asset service providers bill work?
Of course, this is a law that, of course, Kenyans have been waiting for. Of course, it is a step closer to formalizing the cryptocurrency and digital asset regulation. Of course, this after the National Assembly approved the Virtual Asset Services Provider (VASP) bill at the committee stage. Of course, now this is now a clear indication that, of course, it shall be now go to the final reading, and of course now the final step, that is the presidential assent. And of course, the Treasury Cabinet Secretary John Badi announced it in January that the draft framework aims to regulate a VASP and a virtual asset VAS, of course, while managing the resultant risk that cryptocurrencies facilitate money laundering and fraud. Of course, Kenya's financial sector is a beacon of innovation and growth in Africa. And of course, the government is committed to creating necessary legal and regulatory framework in order, of course, to leverage on opportunities presented by the VAS and VASP while managing the resultant risks. Of course, these are statements by the CS, and under the revised bill, the Central Bank of Kenya and the Capital Market Authority (CMA) will, of course, oversee licensing and the supervision of the virtual asset providers, while the Treasury will draft the detailed regulations. Of course, this will cover the stable coins, tokenized assets, trading platform, cyber security, advertising, and anti-money and laundering.
Right, Dennis, let's leave it there for now. We live in interesting times, eh? Regulations have to adjust now to these new developments and all of that. Thanks so much again for your time.
Thank you so much, Asanda. Have a good day.
You too. Dennis Beru is a journalist and team leader at Grassroots Journalism, Kenya, and he brings us analysis for our East Africa region on Tuesdays here on Rise and Shine.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
Amajita are through to the knockout round of the FIFA Under-20 World Cup. Be with us this Wednesday at 9:30 Central African Time, that's in the evening, as South Africa's Under-20s face Colombia, streaming live on SABC+. And there's more. Other Under-20 World Cup matches are streaming live on SABC+, with selected fixtures on SABC Sport Channel and SABC. Wave the flag, Mzansi, stand up for Amajita. FIFA Under-20 World Cup. Amajita coverage on SABC Plus is powered by SABC Sport. That's the South African Broadcasting Corporation Sport.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
And now let's say good morning to Onele Nzinzi. She's got our news headlines.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Madagascar President Andry Rajoelina has named Army General Rufin Fortunate Zafisambo as Prime Minister. This comes a week after dissolving the government in response to ongoing protests over power and water shortages. Tanzania's opposition Chadema party has accused police of wounding 16 of its supporters during the treason trial of the party's chairperson Tundu Lissu. Police have not yet commented on the incident, which took place outside a court in Dar es Salaam yesterday. And the French President Emmanuel Macron has given his outgoing Prime Minister 48 hours to reach a deal to form a government. This is after Sebastian Lecornu resigned suddenly after 26 days in office. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Right, let's head over to the sports desk now and find out what's been happening in the world of sport across the continent and beyond. And we say very good morning to you, Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Peter. Very good morning from the Sports Desk. So the Confederation of African Football, CAF, under the leadership of President Dr. Patrice Motsepe, has announced the return to profitability, reversing several years of financial deficits, as well as achieving significant growth as part of the organization's turnaround strategy adopted back in 2021. So this was announced at the 47th CAF Ordinary General Assembly in Kinshasa in the Democratic Republic of Congo on Monday. CAF has reported a net profit of $9.48 million for the 2023-2024 financial year, making the first profit declared in several years. Now, this achievement reflects a strong increase in commercial revenues driven by the growing global appeal of African football, the addition of new sponsors, as well as the implementation of strict financial controls by the CAF leadership. So over the years, when CAF was facing significant financial deficit as well as multiple challenges, including several legal disputes, President Motsepe initiated a strategic turnaround plan aimed at making CAF as well as African football globally competitive as well as financially self-sustaining. So over and above declaring a for the very first time in several years at the 47th Ordinary General Assembly in Kinshasa, CAF also has significantly increased the investment in competitions, prize monies, financial support for zonal unions as well as member associations, and of course spending in development programs. This turnaround reflects CAF's strengthened commercial strategy as well as commitment to ensuring that financial growth directly benefits players, clubs as well as member associations. Now, CAF's revenue continued to grow, now up to 166.4 $42 million. CAF also has strengthened its global positioning through high-profile partnerships as well as sponsorship agreements, ensuring that African football remains a premier platform for global brands. Now, these agreements reinforce CAF's mission to deliver world-class competitions as well as enhance football commercials value across the continent, with the number of CAF sponsors as well as partners growing to 16 in the year 2024-2025. On to cricket news now. Nonkululeko Mlaba with the ball, as well as Tasman Brits, as well as Senelus with the bat, powered South Africa's women to a 6-wicket victory over New Zealand in the ICC World Cup match played at the Holka Cricket Ground in Ndoro on Monday. Mlaba claimed 4 for 40, her second best return in ODIs, as South Africa restricted New Zealand to a modest 231 all out in 47.5 overs, while Brits slammed a brilliant century and shared a second wicket partnership of 159 in 170 balls, the biggest for any wicket for South Africa in ODI World Cups, while Senelus 83 not out as South Africa reached their target in 40.5 overs. It was also a fitting response by Laura Wolfhardt's team after their dismal 10-wicket defeat at the hands of England last Friday, when they were dismissed for just 69 runs. Back home now, South African Paralympian Puseletso Mabota is thrilled after winning gold at the World Para-Athletics Championships in the T63 men's 100-meter event in New Delhi in India this past weekend. Mabota equaled the World Championships record with a time of 12.3 seconds. Team South Africa now has 4 medals, with Simone Kruger clinching gold in the F38 discus event, and Cheryl James as well as Colin Malalela winning a bronze medal apiece in the 10:34 400 as well as the 10:47 400 meter events respectively. Mabota says this achievement is life-changing for him.
Being world champion this year has given me a sense of pride and a sense of contentness. I'm happy to be in the position that I'm in and glad to be in the position to be world champion, and I've been given the chance to compete at such a high level.
Now, the 20-year-old had previously won silver in the same event at the World Championships in Kobe in Japan back in 2024. Having equaled the World Championships record on Sunday, Mabota says he's truly honored that he has won this title and is now world champion once again.
I don't think I broke the record. I think I tied the championship record, because last year the time that I ran the final was the time that was ran in last year's final at the World Championships in Kobe. So I think they had a little mix-up with the records and everything, but the championship record is in my name now, and that gives me another sense of pride, knowing that okay, I'm in a position to have a championship record and I can defend that in the next upcoming World Championships.
Right, so on that positive note, it's a wrap from the sports desk at this hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, remember to send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. I'm back with more sports news in the next hour for Channel Africa Sport. I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa, meet Abedi.
Yeah, that's me.
Abedi is a music lover through and through.
I really love African music.
He's got a taste for all kinds of tunes and spends his days listening to Channel Africa. Guess what? He didn't know.
Okay.
Channel Africa wants to help Abedi and all music lovers everywhere to discover even more incredible music. That is why Channel Africa is calling on all African musicians to submit their music musicians, remember to give us all your relevant information. Make your submissions at music@channelafrica.co.za. Submissions are your chance to be heard on radio. But sadly, they do not guarantee that you will be playlisted. All submissions will be carefully reviewed to see if they meet our station's requirement. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Let's check in with the world of business now as we say good morning for the first time on the 7th of October to Chandugo Ligege. He's got our business news.
Business news on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. The Hospital Association of South Africa, HASA, has called for unity of purpose and collaboration between the private sector and government in the country's approach to universal access to healthcare. HASA is hosting a 2-day annual conference in Johannesburg under the theme Innovation and the Future of Healthcare Provision. The organization has taken government to court over the NHI, maintaining that in its current form, the policy is neither sustainable nor affordable. Talks at the conference are also centered around efficient leadership and the use of technology in transforming the healthcare sector.
Our focus, like I said a little earlier, is what does this all mean to the patient? Our next steps and what should be done is going to be defined by that. We are now seeking to get closer to other stakeholders and reach out to government and see how do we all contribute towards the achievement of the goals of universal health access.
The African National Congress Party in South Africa has identified a 10-point plan to increase growth, create jobs and end poverty. This came out at the end of its 3-day special NEC meeting in Boksburg, east of Johannesburg yesterday. Despite remaining far below the level needed to reduce high levels of poverty and inequality, the country's growth rate improved in the second quarter of 2025, reaching its fastest in 2 years. But ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa says there is a lot that still needs to be done. He unveiled his party's intervention to reignite growth in the economy.
The first intervention is to use electricity tariffs and investment in transmission to drive economic activity. This means preferential electricity tariffs for ferrochrome and manganese as well as steel. The second intervention is to accelerate the recovery of our freight and logistics sector. The third intervention is to rebuild our chrome and manganese industries. The NEC resolved that the fourth intervention must be to improve the capacity of the state to manage major projects.
The African National Congress has vowed to rebuild and restore South Africa's state-owned enterprises to their glory days of developmental instruments. The 3-day meeting was called to discuss, among others, how to reignite growth in the economy and the guidelines of candidates for the 2026 local elections. ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa explains.
We need to rebuild and reform state-owned enterprises to be effective developmental instruments. We are already seeing quite a lot of progress in a number of our state-owned enterprises as they are regaining their own capability and also attracting experienced and well-qualified people to come and work in there. The efficient and well-governed state-owned enterprises are vital to economic growth and also vital to our national competitiveness.
Barrick Mining Corporation has announced that it has reached an agreement to sell its interests in the Tongon gold mine and certain of its exploration properties in Côte d'Ivoire to the Atlantic Group for total consideration of up to $305 million. The consideration is composed of a cash consideration of $192 million, inclusive of a $23 million shareholder loan repayment within 6 months of closing and contingent cash payments totaling up to $113 million, payable based on the price of gold over 2.5 years and resource conversions over 5 years. Proceeds from the sale will be used to further strengthen Barrick's balance sheet and support a commitment to continue to deliver returns to the shareholders. Global stocks firmed yesterday after recovering from an earlier rout when the collapse of the French government took markets by surprise. New French Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu resigned on Monday, barely 14 hours after appointing his cabinet. By closing yesterday, the pan-European benchmark Stoxx 600 was up 0.13%, but France's CAC 40 was still down 1.2%, having earlier sunk as much as 2.2%. US S&P 500 futures firmed 0.3% ahead of the open, with the cash index having risen to a record high on Friday. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,467 naira. In Botswana, 13 pula 20. Kenya, the dollar is 128 shilling 329. Zambia, 23 kwacha 80. BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is at 5 real 32. In Russia, 82 rubles 59. India 88 rupees 74, China 71.14, South Africa 17 rand 22 cents. $1 is 74 pence to the British pound, 85 to the euro. Commodities: gold is $3,961, platinum at $1,618 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil at $65.71 a barrel. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email, newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chandruko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
Right, it's time now for your G20 fact of the day. Did you know that the G20 was upgraded to the level of heads of state in the wake of the global economic and financial crisis of 2007? And in 2009, it comprises 19 countries: Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, France, Germany, India, Indonesia, Italy, Japan, Republic of Korea, Mexico, Russia, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Turkey, United Kingdom, the United States, and 2 regional bodies, namely the European Union, the EU, and the African Union, the AU. And that's our G20 fact for today.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
SAA Link is in the process of procuring 10 new second-generation Embraer E2-195 jet aircraft. This in its bid to expand its airline service in South Africa and across the continent. It's done this through a US-based aviation leasing company, Azora, which buys first and second-hand aircraft and leases them or sells onto airlines around the world. SABC's senior economics reporter Nompumelelo Siziba, who was in Brazil for the formal handover of the aircraft, filed this report.
Celebrating a concluded deal, SAA Link is procuring 10 new second-generation E2-195 jet aircraft produced by Brazilian aircraft designer and manufacturer Embraer. The two companies have a relationship dating back nearly 50 years, with SAA Link already operating and maintaining 68 Embraer-produced aircraft in its current fleet. With the new aircraft it's procuring having a longer range, simply meaning they can travel further across the African continent, Airlink has high expansion ambitions.
Opportunities like Nigeria would be an option for us with these new aircraft in terms of the distance. Potentially looking at some of the islands that we have around the coast of Africa. So anything where we can't currently reach become opportunities. If there's sufficient demand and the market wants it, then we can have a look at those options.
Asked whether the new aircraft would enable Airlink to provide more competitive pricing to its customers, Whelan indicated that would be a factor on the agenda.
Absolutely. I think for us and for most airlines as well, the bigger the aircraft, the better the unit cost per seat. So we'll be able to definitely do some differential pricing, which we haven't had the opportunity to do so far, utilizing these new E2 aircraft.
Across the global aviation industry, airlines secure aircraft through different financing mechanisms. Azora, which is going to be leasing the 10 E2195 aircraft to Airlink, explained some of those options.
Airlines have different objectives in financing aircraft. There are many different scenarios. Some airlines choose to finance aircraft off balance sheet. They like the flexibility of a lease, an operating lease, versus having to own the aircraft and then process the aircraft out of the business and take residual value risk. So we kind of provide that flexibility. That's one reason why they might lease. Another reason why they might lease is we have particularly select delivery positions with the manufacturer. In this case, Embraer. We placed a speculative order with them where we didn't have customers. We just ordered aircraft into the future. And the airline likes our delivery position, so they're willing to lease the aircraft from us.
Meanwhile, the manufacturer of the E2195 jets, Embraer, says while Airlink is its largest customer on the African continent, it has great hopes about the continent's future and getting more of its up to 150-seater aircraft traversing the region, estimating that demand for aircraft could be around 400 over the next 2 decades.
Africa is a very exciting market for us, and we were just talking about the market forecast. So over the next 20 years in the segment up to 150 seats, we actually forecast a delivery of around 380 aircraft over those next 20 years. And we, of course, want to continue to build our segment leadership. So we'll be working very hard with the airlines in order to get a big chunk of those future deliveries. What's driving it? I think there are several factors. Africa has some of the strongest growing economies around the world. Just take Nigeria, for instance, for a market, Kenya, Ethiopia, Southern Africa in terms of the economic growth. There's a lot of continued growth moving out into the future. The population continues to grow. It's a very young continent. Around half of the population is at an average age of 20 years. So there's an increasingly high propensity to travel. And if you combine all of those factors, plus market liberalization, better access to financing for the aircraft, which could be aircraft leasing solutions or direct financing, that's some of the drivers that we believe will ultimately lead to the demand of those new aircraft well into the future.
Gracing the ceremonial formalities was South African Ambassador to Brazil, Vusi Mafimbela. He says given the strategic relationship between South Africa and Brazil, especially through BRICS, there's much scope for partnerships with companies like Embraer, particularly in the area of defense, noting that the Defense Ministry is keen to engage with Embraer to lean on its defense technology expertise.
Brazil is a very important component in BRICS. And you know that most of the aircrafts producing countries are outside BRICS. Brazil is one of those prominent ones that are within BRICS. And BRICS is discussing the creation of an interest, a trend, a track that deals with aviation. So we need a country within BRICS that has got the capacity to actually form the fulcrum, the very base of the development of that track, aviation industry within BRICS. So the relationship is all faceted.
Including this latest aircraft, Airlink will have received 3 of the E2195s during this year, with the balance of 7 set to be delivered over 2026 and 2027. And while the continent faces economic hurdles like high debt in some countries, a number of African countries, expected to be the fastest growing in the coming years, are expected to be at the forefront of demand for more aircraft to aid in powering the goals of the African Continental Free Trade Area to unlock greater trade, movement of people, and with that, greater economic prospects. Nompemelo Siziba, SABC News, Sao Paulo, Brazil.
The Hospital Association of South Africa, HASA, is hosting a 2-day conference in Johannesburg in South Africa. Now, this year's conference takes place under the theme Sustainable Healthcare Together. Now, the meeting is attended by several international and South African experts in healthcare. An exhibition is also running simultaneously, showcasing the latest innovation in the healthcare industry. Channel Africa news reporter Tuto Ngobeni spoke to the Chief Executive Officer of HASA, Dumisani Bomela, about the conference.
So this is an annual event that we stage. We've been doing it for quite a while now, for upwards of 20 years. And it's really got a significant role in our health calendar, in the sense that it's the biggest by feedback from our audiences in the past and best hospital conference in Africa. So we took this opportunity again, thanks to our wonderful team that has put the event together, to bring all the role players, significant stakeholders in healthcare. We've got funders, we've got service providers, we've got academics, policymakers, legislators, and it happens at a critical time in our history, healthcare history in South Africa, when there is a lot of debate about our future healthcare system, and a lot of people have got this awareness that what must our health system look like in the future. And so we therefore think it's an opportune platform. And if you look at the themes, they speak to that. We've got a whole period where we're discussing on the leadership theme. We need leadership more than anything else at this juncture in our healthcare system, as South African society and other aspects of our lives as well. There is innovation and there is quality of healthcare.
Now, in terms of this conference, does it include the private sector? Is it public and private sector? And speak to us about the significance of public and private sector partnership, especially in terms of the country's healthcare system.
It's an inclusive conference. It's a gathering that reflects exactly what we think is needed for our country. The minds from the public side of healthcare and the private side of healthcare coming together, because we look at healthcare as, even though we may be private hospitals that are staging the conference, but we look at healthcare systematically as a collaborative effort that is going to deliver to the entire population, and that is our vision.
That was Dr. Dumisani Bomela, who's the Chief Executive Officer at the Hospital Association of South Africa, speaking to Channel Africa news reporter Tuto Ngobeni.
The African National Congress, ANC party in South Africa, has identified a 10-point plan to increase growth, create jobs, and end poverty. This came out at the end of its 3-day Special National Executive Committee, or NEC, meeting in Boksburg, east of Johannesburg, on Monday. Despite remaining far below the level needed to reduce high levels of poverty and inequality, the country's growth rate improved in the second quarter of 2025, reaching its fastest in 2 years. But ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa says there's a lot that still needs to be done. SABC politics reporter Ntebo Mukobo has more.
South Africa's economic growth outlook has been revised downward several times. The economy is now projected to grow at around 1% this year, but both economists and politicians agree that more efforts are needed to realize that. And for its part, the ANC has unveiled a 10-point plan to spur growth and create the much-needed jobs, as party president Cyril Ramaphosa explains.
The first intervention is to use electricity tariffs and investment in transmission to drive economic activity. This means preferential electricity tariffs for ferrochrome and manganese, as well as steel. The second intervention is to accelerate the recovery of our freight and logistics sector. The third intervention is to rebuild our chrome and manganese industries. The NEC resolved that the fourth intervention must be to improve the capacity of the state to manage major projects, to address infrastructure delays due to weak capacity.
The ANC president has vowed to rebuild and restore the country's state-owned enterprises to their glory days of developmental instruments. He has used Eskom, which has made 16 billion rand profit and slowly but surely turned the tide against load shedding, as a shining example of their intervention.
We need to rebuild and reform state-owned enterprises to be effective developmental instruments. We are already seeing quite a lot of progress in a number of our state-owned enterprises as they are regaining their own capability and also attracting experienced and well-qualified people to come and work in there. The efficient and well-governed state-owned enterprises are vital to economic growth and also vital to our national competitiveness.
Ramaphosa said things are beginning to improve as more people with skills are now taking up positions in these government institutions. And for now, the job is cut out for all ANC deployees in government, as they are expected to implement their plan to revive the economy and ensure growth.
Arising out of our meeting this weekend, the NEC directs its deployees at all levels of government to finalize economic interventions that will rebuild our economy through ensuring that their APPs are streamlined to achieve all the three priorities of the 7th administration. Our organization has significant policies and plans that can resolve the economic emergency that we face. Our task now is to ensure effective and immediate implementation. Through the Government of National Unity, we will undertake these key interventions to reignite growth and to create jobs.
The ANC president says a war room will be established in the presidency to monitor efforts to boost economic growth. Meanwhile, the ANC Economic Transformation Committee, on the other hand, will unpack the plan and its intervention to the nation later this week. I am Tebo Mokobo Boxbeck in Ekuruleni.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
South Africa's national under-20 men's football team, Amajita, are through to the knockout round of the FIFA Under-20 World Cup. Be with us this Wednesday at 21:30 Central African Time as Amajita face Colombia, streaming live on SABC Plus, and there's more. Other Under-20 World Cup matches are also streaming live on SABC Plus, with selected fixtures on SABC Sport channel and also SABC One. Wave the flag. Mzansi, stand up for Amajita. FIFA Under-20 World Cup Amajita coverage on SABC Plus, powered by SABC Sport.
Seven o'clock Central African Time it is. Good morning. If you've just joined us, this is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa. My name is Asanda Beda.
And I'm Peter Ndoro. The news is next with Onel Nsinsi and sports headlines with Musibudi Makura.
SABC News. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Madagascar President Andry Rajoelina has named Army General Rufin Fortunate Zafisambo as Prime Minister. This comes a week after dissolving the government in response to ongoing protests over power and water shortages. Zafisambo replaces Prime Minister Christian Tse, who was dismissed as part of the president's move. The general was the director of the military cabinet in the Prime Minister's office until this appointment. Ahead of naming him, Rajoelina said the country needed a Prime Minister capable of restoring order and the people's trust. Earlier yesterday, protesters returned to the streets in the African island nation for a third week of anti-government demonstrations. South Africa's KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi is set to appear before Parliament's ad hoc committee today. The committee has been set up to investigate Mkhwanazi's allegations, which include corruption, political interference and criminal infiltration of the justice system. Parliament has appointed Advocate Norman Arendse as its evidence leader. Mkhwanazi will be the first senior police official to appear before the committee. Tanzania's opposition Chadema party has accused police of wounding 16 of its supporters during the treason trial of the party's chairperson, Tundu Lissu. Police have not yet commented on the incident, which took place outside a court in Dar es Salaam, where a group had gathered to follow proceedings. The BBC's Alfred Lansek.
Tanzania's main opposition Chadema party says several of its members were injured as police forcibly removed them from court premises. It said those injured were being treated in hospital. The hearing has been adjourned until tomorrow. During the proceedings, Chadema chairman Tundu Lissu questioned why a sentence date had been set before the trial had even begun. Mr. Lissu is facing treason charges. If convicted, he could face a death penalty.
The U.S. has deported 10 people to Eswatini despite rights groups in the Southern African state mounting legal action to block the plan. This is the second batch of deportees that the Trump administration has sent to Eswatini as part of its hard-line approach towards immigration. Eswatini's prison department, in a statement, said that the 10 have been securely accommodated, and pose no threat to the public. Eswatini human rights lawyer Zwandile Masuku told the BBC that he was shocked and dismayed that the government had taken in the group despite the ongoing court case against the arrival of 5 deportees in July. And lastly, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for the unconditional release of all Israeli hostages. He has also described the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza as being on a scale that defies comprehension. Sharon Bryce Peace reports.
Guterres called the Hamas-led attack on Israel 2 years ago abhorrent and urged that the day be used to remember all those who were killed and suffered horrific violence. He also called for an end to civilians paying with their lives and their futures, while welcoming US President Donald Trump's peace proposal as an opportunity to bring the tragic conflict to an end. The UN chief said a permanent ceasefire and a credible political process were essential to prevent further bloodshed and pave the way for a peace in which Israelis, Palestinians, and all the peoples of the region could live side by side in security, dignity, and mutual respect. Sherwin Bryce's SABC News, New York.
Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Tamsin Brits takes South Africa to a 6-wicket victory over New Zealand at the ODI Cricket Women's World Cup, while CAF returns to profitability ways following an increased duration of money in the last 2023-2025 financial year. I'll give you details of these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Start your day informed, inspired, and entertained. Asanda and Peter bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
The Africa Commission on Human and People's Rights has ruled that the Democratic Republic of Congo violated women's rights through sexual violence committed by state security forces in South Kivu. The landmark decision orders not only compensation for survivors, but also systemic reforms, including public apologies, official training, and reporting to the Commission. Joining us now from Equality Now is Mumbi Mugo, who's a program officer and also a member of the Legal Equality team, to discuss the implications of this ruling. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, this is being described as historic, this decision. Tell us why, and why it's so consequential for the survivors of these atrocities in the DRC.
Thank you so much. This decision is significant, not just for the brave women of Fizi in DRC, but for women in Africa who are going through armed conflict, or women in armed conflict in different states in Africa. The decision is also significant and historic because it is part of Africa's growing jurisprudence on upholding the rights of women in conflict, as you have seen. And as you have rightly mentioned, the decision has outlined quite a number of measures, reparation measures for the survivors in DRC, and of course setting a very strong precedent. So it's quite historic. And as you will see in our conversation, the decision also is demanding systemic change beyond monetary compensation. Is demanding systemic change to prevent repetition of those crimes, and also to build a culture of accountability in DRC.
Beyond the monetary measures, which reparations do you think is probably the most important, and why?
In international humanitarian law, we are required, or governments are required, to come up with a number of reparation measures. And one of them, which we can talk about, is the public apology and the integration of human rights training in institutions in DRC, such as the judiciary, the military, as well as publication of the decision in DRC's official gazette. Why this is important is one of the ways to effectively ensure that the state is taking responsibility and accountability for the survivors is by the publishing and issuing of a public apology. This is essential because it helps the government or the state to ensure that the survivors, their status as survivors is officially recognized by the government. In some countries, such as Colombia, they have like memorials erected, and they have public awareness campaigns that will help people to really understand and comprehend the impact of the atrocities that happened to these survivors, and also to comprehend the impact that the atrocities has had on their lives, and also to comprehend the extent to which their lives will never be the same pre-war, and how they cannot go back to that situation. So the publication of the apology, the integration of the human rights training, and the publication of the African Commission decision by DRC on its official gazette, it helps us to comprehend the lived realities of these survivors. So I would say it is about transformative justice. And also the human rights integration in those institutions is about changing institutional culture. And publishing the decision is about fostering transparency and accountability on the side of the government. And just saying, you know what, that we have realized that sexual violence in armed conflict is not a collateral damage, but a serious human rights violation.
I suppose a commission ruling such as this is very important and significant. Compliance becomes the next layer, and I'm sure that this is probably going to face some political challenges. Do you think we'll see compliance?
I must say that in any event where we have received decisions in whichever court, implementation, especially in Africa, is always the real test. And the decision, unfortunately or fortunately, coincides with ongoing conflict in DRC. It's currently ongoing. And we also have cases that have been reported on sexual violence, and women continue to suffer. But I would say all hope is not lost, because one of the things that the African Commission has reminded us is that sexual violence in armed conflict is not a collateral damage, but a serious violation of human rights, and as a weapon of war. So it therefore remains a critical and important jurisprudence, even in the ongoing conflict. So the hope is that the decision is going to put pressure on the DRC government to act, and failure to comply on the side of DRC is not just a legal issue, but also a moral issue. So the human rights training that have been outlined by the African Commission as well. It's not just symbolic, but it is measures that are going to force the state institutions to fully engage. And this is the military, the judiciary, even the health providers, to really engage in conversations, national conversations on the ongoing conflict. All in all, we are relying on the political will of the DRC to act upon this decision, and also the decision by the African Commission to have DRC report within 6 months gives us an upper hand as civil society and other stakeholders to really follow up and track progress.
And perhaps finally, what would you like people across the continent, policymakers, civil society, media, and even ordinary citizens, what should they take away from this ruling?
Number one is that the African Commission has once again reinforced the Africa's promise, which is the Maputo Protocol, that has been there to fight for the rights of women and girls. I think it is our promise, and we are really happy that the African Commission and once again the Maputo Protocol has come to that front. The other thing is that impunity has consequences, and using sexual violence as a weapon of war in conflict eventually catches up. And again, as I have said before, sexual violence is not collateral damage, and other countries that have armed conflict ongoing should come to realize that eventually the law will catch up with them.
Mumbi, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very, very much indeed for joining us and talking to us about this very important ruling. And let's hope that its consequences are felt far and wide. Thank you so much. That was Mumbi Mugo from Equality Now speaking to us about this landmark ruling that could reshape how conflict-related sexual violence is addressed across the continent.
From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
7:15 Central African time it is, and of course you are still with Channel Africa. The show is called Rise and Shine with Asanda and Peter, who's back today.
Yes, indeed. How could I tell you, getting ill at this time of the year, as summer is approaching, not great, but I'm back to 95%, I think. Yeah.
All right. Great. Let's take a look at this story now. The South African Medical Association, SAMA, has officially suspended all relations with the Israeli Medical Association, a move welcomed by healthcare workers for Palestine, South Africa. The organization says this decision represents a powerful stand for medical ethics, justice, and human rights, echoing the global call for solidarity with Palestinians. To unpack this development and what it means for the broader healthcare community, we're joined by Dr. Sadiq Mullah, Chairperson of Healthcare Workers for Palestine, South Africa. Dr. Mullah, good morning to you and thank you for making time.
Good morning, Asanda, and hello to the listeners.
So what significance does SAMA's decision hold for the global medical community and the broader movement for Palestinian solidarity, specifically at this time?
So, Asanda, over the last 2 years, Israel's attacks in Gaza have included many attacks on the healthcare system. We've seen healthcare workers killed and abducted, and over 1,500 have been killed already. Ambulances have been targeted, hospitals bombed and raided. And this is in contravention of the Geneva Conventions and international law. Healthcare workers around the world have increasingly been speaking up about this, and humanitarian organizations and right groups on the ground, such as Doctors Without Borders, Physicians for Human Rights Israel, they've come out quite strongly calling it a genocide and condemning Israel. And recently, we've also seen other national associations, such as the British Medical Association, the Turkish. They've released quite strongly worded statements, although none have gone as far as SAMA to cut ties with the Israeli Medical Association, as well as to call for the suspension from the World Medical Association. So I think it's a watershed moment that an organization has actually taken this step. And it's not an idle threat. SAMA is a member of the World Medical Association, and they can action this resolution by bringing it before the World Medical Association. I think this is one way that we can ensure accountability for what's happening. And I know many in the Palestine Solidarity Movement, they've been out month after month at protests and events, and they're wondering, is anyone listening? Especially when, despite all our activities, we just keep seeing these devastating images coming out of Gaza. And I think Sama's announcement shows that our leaders are listening and we are making a difference.
Can you elaborate on the role of the Israeli Medical Association in what you've called violations of medical ethics and human rights?
I think one of the key problems that we have with the Israeli Medical Association is that they're providing cover for the Israeli state. By and large, they've repeatedly defended the Israeli government in the medical journals, usually by very uncritically just repeating state propaganda. For example, they've often repeated these debunked claims that Hamas is using hospitals for military purposes, which has been used to justify the targeting of healthcare workers and the destruction of hospitals. They've also really only released watered-down statements, and they failed to take any sort of action against healthcare workers who violate the principles of medical ethics. For example, a while back, there was a very infamous letter where a group of Israeli doctors, several hundred, signed it, and they called for the destruction of Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza. And while they may have released a little statement, they didn't do anything further. They've also not really done anything about doctors who've been present during the torture of prisoners, and this long precedes October 7. So I think Sama is correct in its action in that it's not really in South Africa's interest for us to be partnering with an organization like this.
What do you hope other healthcare and academic institutions in South Africa and internationally will respond following this decision by Sama?
So, Asanda, for the last 2 years, South Africa's healthcare and academic institutions have been far too silent on the genocide that's taking place. They really haven't spoken out enough, as many of our colleagues are being killed there. But it's not just in South Africa, it's an international problem too. And in fact, there was a quote in on the cover of the recent edition of The Lancet, which is one of the leading medical journals in the world, which said that most medical and surgical societies worldwide have remained silent or issued a vague statement about Gaza's health aside. And that staying silent while pretending to be neutral is in effect a form of complicity. And this, the stance that organizations have taken has contrasted quite sharply with crisis elsewhere, where the health community has been much more vocal. But we are starting to see a change now, and I hope that institutions will study Sama's resolutions, that they'll issue similar resolutions and statements in support of Sama, as well as suspending their own ties with their Israeli counterparts. Internationally, I hope also that institutions will support Sama's call for the suspension of the IMA from the World Medical Association. This will send a powerful message that violation of medical ethics will not be tolerated.
Yeah, Dr. Mula, thank you so much again for your time and the work that you're doing at Sama.
Thank you for having us on the show, Sandra.
Our pleasure. Dr. Sadiq Mula is chairperson of Healthcare Workers for Palestine, South Africa. A lot of groups and countries taking a stand against Israel, you know, and I think it's not just condemnation now that has been happening, it's being advanced to action, which is good to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, this has taken time, though. Hey? I mean, this conflict, this is one of the deadliest in recent decades, but it's been a long-standing one. And for some reason, the Middle East hasn't had the attention that it deserves. But this time around, things have shifted significantly. Even at the beginning of this war, a lot of the major powers were resistant. One by one, slowly but slowly, I think they're getting pressure from their own countries, citizens, to take a stand. And that's what we're starting to see more and more as this story continues to unfold, sadly.
And the development of those 6 South Africans that were detained there in the flotilla, delivering aid, now being released, is obviously good news. It's welcomed news.
Yeah, and we're seeing marches around the world in numbers I don't think I've seen in recent times over any particular cause. There's just been massive solidarity. But let's continue to unpack that story now because it has been, 2 years since the 9/11 attacks that took place in Israel. 7 October 2023, you'll remember the Hamas attacks on Israel, a wrenching moment that left more than 1,200 people dead and over 250 taken hostage. And that served as a catalyst for the ongoing war in Gaza. And we believe that as many as 60,000, possibly in the hundreds of thousands once bodies are discovered under all the rubble. And this has catalyzed this ongoing war in Gaza. Amid this solemn anniversary, indirect peace talks are taking place in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, under US, Egyptian and Qatari mediation. Israel has now signaled support for a 20-point peace plan, whilst Hamas has accepted only certain elements of it. These negotiations unfold in the shadows of a humanitarian crisis, continued bombardments, the deportation of activists, and mounting international pressure. Well, to help us understand what's at stake and whether this moment might break the cycle of violence, I'm now joined by Naeem Jina, who's a senior researcher at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection, MISTRA. Thank you for joining us, Naeem. Always good to talk to you.
Thank you, Peter.
2 years on, I don't think anybody 2 years ago thought that it would last this long and there would be so much loss of life.
Yeah, certainly outside of Netanyahu's war cabinet, I don't think that anyone thought that that would be the case. I mean, from the Palestinian side, remember that 3 days after the 7th of October attack, or 2 days, they offered to release all the civilian hostages immediately and then negotiate for prisoner exchange of the military hostages or military captives with Palestinian prisoners. So it seems that from their perspective, they expected that this whole thing could be done in a week or two. Exchange of prisoners and go back to what things were like before, not a genocide over 2 years.
So many people will argue, historians particularly, and activists, whatever, but I guess in modern times, 1948 was a line in the sand in terms of what we're seeing in modern times, this Israeli-Palestine conflict. When you look back at all of that, how significant is this 2-year period in how the world sees the story in this part of the Middle East?
Quite possibly, and history will judge, but quite possibly this 2-year period has been or will be seen as the most significant from the almost 80 years of Israeli occupation. The most significant part of that 80 years, or almost 80 years. It was what was unleashed 2 years ago in the attack on Israel by the resistance in Gaza, was perhaps the most audacious attack by against the occupation by Palestinians. And let's remember that Palestinians, as an occupied people, have the right under international law to resist the occupation, even through military means. And so it was the most audacious of those. And what has happened since then over the past 2 years has seen global opinion change in a very significant way. Millions of people marching on streets around the world. The ICJ case, which challenges not only the genocide, but challenges international law as a whole. That's the South African ICJ case. The number of states that have signed on to that case, including European states. The scramble a few weeks ago for, what we could debate about whether it's significant or not, but the scramble for European states to recognize a Palestinian state. I don't believe it's significant as a state, but it's significant that they did this. So all of this, I mean, the flotilla over the past 2 weeks that we saw, the largest flotilla trying to break the siege on Gaza, the siege that has been in place for the past 18 years. I think that history, certainly for the West Asia region, but I suspect globally that history will not be the same after this 2-year period.
And that takes us to now, after 2 years of war and stalemate. Talk to us about these Sharm el-Sheikh indirect talks. Are they a game changer? Is something really happening?
It seems that something is really happening. I mean, let's remember that this is not the first proposal on the table to end the genocide and to have a ceasefire. Early last year, there was a proposal from the Americans, mediated by the Americans and Qataris and Egyptians, as this one is now, for a ceasefire. Then subsequently, a few times, and then when Trump came into the White House again, in January, there was actually a ceasefire for a brief period. All of these were violated by Israel. Israel never abided by the conditions of whatever plan they accepted. And when they accepted it after being forced, cajoled, and taken kicking and screaming to the table. The similar thing has happened now. I mean, Netanyahu. So we remember that this proposal that Trump has put on the table was discussed first with a group of Arab and Muslim leaders, and they announced a 21-point proposal. Then he met with the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, and it became a 20-point proposal. So it was changed. Quite a bit was changed from what he had presented in the earlier meeting. And immediately after that meeting between Netanyahu and Trump, Netanyahu at a media conference said that Israel will never withdraw from Gaza, despite having agreed to that in that proposal. So again, there was no intention from Netanyahu to go along with what he seemingly agreed to with the American president. But he was then forced now to go to the table. Yesterday, the talks began. It seems that there is some progress. They deliberated yesterday over the first part of the implementation of the proposal, which is the issue of the exchange of captives. Let's remember that Israel holds more than 10,000 Palestinians in its prison, including hundreds of children. And so that is supposed to happen soon. So they're looking at names of who will be released, etc. yesterday. There are sticking points. The major sticking point from the Israeli side is that the proposal is that they withdraw not entirely from Gaza, but to the borders of Gaza with a buffer zone inside. They're not happy about that. From the Palestinian side, they are not happy with the notion that they should be forced to disarm. One of the things that is not a sticking point is that the proposal says there would be a technocratic government put into place. The Palestinians agree to that. Hamas and the other factions agree to that. However, they want a Palestinian technocratic government, not a foreign structure with the likes of Tony Blair in it.
Right. Well, that's where we're going to have to leave it. Unfortunately, time not on our side, but something we'll certainly be continuing to talk about in the coming days. Naeem, always good to talk to you. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Peter.
And that was Naeem Gina of Mistra talking to us about partly the anniversary of the October 7 attacks, 7 October 2023, and also the Sharm el-Sheikh talks that are underway to try and bring an end to that 2-year conflict. It's time for your news headlines. Here's Onelen Sinsi.
SABC News headlines. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. The International Criminal Court has convicted the first Janjaweed militia leader put on trial for atrocities committed in Sudan's Darfur region more than 20 years ago. The court found Ali Muhammad Abd al-Rahman guilty of 27 counts of crimes against humanity and war crimes. South Africa's KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi is set to appear before Parliament's ad hoc committee today. The committee has been set up to investigate Mkhwanazi's allegations, which include corruption, political interference and criminal infiltration of the justice system in the country. And the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for the unconditional release of all Israeli hostages. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's now check in with the world of sports as we say good morning to Musibudi Makura. She's got our sports news.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Asanda. Very good morning once again from the sports desk. So Hugo Bruce, the head coach of the South African men's national football team, Bafana Bafana, has confirmed that Kaizer Chiefs attacker Mduduzi Abdallah will replace Orlando Pirates star Relebohile Mofokeng, who got injured this past weekend in the Carling knockout against Sewelele FC. So Shabalala was part of the previous camp last month when Bafana Bafana played Lesotho as well as Nigeria in the FIFA 2026 World Cup qualifiers. So for these crucial last two matches of the qualification campaign against Zimbabwe as well as Rwanda, Bruce has a solid and a balanced team. He also shared where he prefers to play Shabalala.
Really Mofokeng, because of the injury he got on Saturday, and we replaced him by Shabalala. Secondly, there are still two players who didn't arrive because they played yesterday. That was Foster and Sitole. So they will arrive tomorrow morning, and tomorrow afternoon we will be complete to do the training.
Onto the story now. The Confederation of African Football, under the leadership of President Dr. Patrice Motsepe, has announced a return to profitability, reversing several years of financial deficits, as well as achieving significant growth as part of the organization's turnaround strategy adopted back in 2021. So this was announced at the 47th CAF Ordinary General Assembly in Kinshasa in the Democratic Republic of Congo on Monday. CAF has reported a net profit of $9.48 million for the 2023-2024 financial year, marking the first profit declared in several years. Now, this achievement also reflects a strong increase in commercial revenues driven by the growing global appeal of African football and the addition of new sponsors, as well as the implementation of strict financial controls by the CAF leadership. So over the years, when CAF was facing a significant financial deficit, as well as multiple challenges, including several legal disputes, the President Motsepe initiated a strategic turnaround plan that is aimed at making CAF, as well as African football, globally competitive, as well as financially self-sustaining. At the same time, over and above declaring a profit for the very first time in several years at the 47th Ordinary General Assembly in Kinshasa, CAF has also significantly increased the investment in competitions, prize monies, financial support for zonal unions as well as member associations, as well as spending in development programs. This turnaround reflects CAF's strategic as well as strengthened commercial strategy and their commitment to ensuring that financial growth directly benefits players, clubs, as well as member associations. Now, CAF's revenues continue to grow now to up to $166.42 million. CAF also has strengthened its global positioning through high-profile partnerships as well as sponsorship agreements, ensuring that African football remains a premier platform for global brands. These agreements reinforce CAF's mission to deliver world-class competitions as well as enhance football's commercial value across the continent, with the number of CAF sponsors as well as partners growing to 16 in the years 2024 and 2025. Well, in case you missed it, Nonkululeko Mlaba with the ball and Tamsman Brits and Sine Lees with the bat powered South Africa's women to a 6-wicket victory over New Zealand in their ICC World Cup match at the Holker Stadium, played in Ndoro on Monday. Mlaba claimed 4 for 40 in her second best return in ODIs as South Africa restricted New Zealand to a modest 231 all out in 47.5 overs, while our Brits slammed a brilliant century and also shared a second wicket partnership of 159 in 170 balls, the biggest of any wicket for South Africa in ODI World Cups, with Sine Lees on 83 not out as South Africa reached their target in 40.5 overs. It was a fitting response by Laura Wolfart's team after their dismal 10-wicket defeat at the hands of England last Friday when they were dismissed for just 69 runs. And finally, in tennis news, qualifier Katarina Sinokova continued her impressive run at the Wuhan Open, defeating 15-seed Diana Schneider in straight sets of 6-4 and 6-4 on Monday. It also marks her fourth top 20 win in 2025 and her second on the Asian swing, underscoring, of course, a strong late-season resurgence. Now, Sinokova, who came through qualifying with back-to-back wins, showed composure as well as tactical variety to outplay the higher-ranked Schneider and also level her head-to-head at 1-all. She now will face rising American star Maya Joint in the round of 32 with the momentum firmly on her side. Well, that concludes the sports news this hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Amajita are through to the knockout round of the FIFA Under-20 World Cup. Be with us this Wednesday at 9:30 Central African Time in the PMs as South Africa's Under-20s face Colombia, streaming live on SABC+. And there's more. Other Under-20 World Cup matches are streaming live on SABC+, with selected fixtures on SABC Sport Channel and SABC 1. Wave the flag, Mzansi, stand up for Amajita. FIFA Under-20 World Cup Amajita coverage on SABC+ is powered by SABC Sport.
Are you fluent in French, Chinyanja, Portuguese, and Kiswahili? Are you passionate about radio? And are you looking to work in South Africa? Do you have papers that qualify you to work in South Africa? In that case, we might have an opportunity for you to work for Channel Africa. Send us your CV and demo at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Remember, if you don't hear from us within 14 days, it means you have not made it or you have not been selected. Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
Time now for your business news. Let's say good morning once again to Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. 30 South African agro-processing companies are showcasing their products at the Anuga International Trade Fair in Cologne, Germany. The trade fair started on the 4th of this month and is scheduled to end tomorrow. South Africa's Deputy Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Zuko Godlimpi, says the trade fair will assist companies in exploring new export markets for their products as part of South Africa's export market diversification initiatives. Chief Director of Export Promotion and Marketing at the department, Zanele Sani.
I think what we've done with the companies that are showcasing there is really maximize what South Africa's capabilities are. So I've just mentioned the rooibos because that's unique to South Africa. We have companies that are providing sauces and canned vegetables. So companies like Dursots, which are very famous in South Africa. We've also got companies that are providing uniquely blended chili oil. That is companies coming from Stellenbosch.
Trade Union Congress of South African Trade Unions in the Western Cape Province will today march to Parliament against retrenchments, weak economic growth and the rising cost of living. The Labour Federation will hand over a memorandum to the parliamentary authorities. COSATU's Provincial Secretary Marvin de Bruyn says they will also march to the Cape Town Civic Centre to hand over another memorandum on high electricity and water tariffs to the city's mayor.
Now we are saying that the people of the Western Cape are unhappy about what's happening in our province and in our city. Hence the call for members to come in the numbers to support the call of COSATU to protest against what's currently happening.
MTN's Zakhele Futhi, the special purpose empowerment vehicle of the mobile operator, has issued a further cautionary announcement to shareholders regarding the planned unwind of the scheme. In a cautionary note to investors, the board says it's still in the process of finalizing the approach it will use to unwind and the return of the residual net asset value to shareholders. It says the final amount to be distributed depends on the cost of the unwind and provisions for any associated liabilities that may arise after the process is implemented. SABC News economist reporter Nosipo Khadebe.
In July, MTN announced that each shareholder will get 20 Rand per share from the scheme, with a further 2 to 3 Rand per share expected later. The total amount of 22 to 23 Rand per share would represent a full return of the original investment and a modest gain. The scheme, meant to empower black investors in the MTN business, was launched in 2016, backed by external funding. Nosipo Khadebe, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Barrick Mining Corporation has announced that it has reached an agreement to sell its interest in the Tongon gold mine and certain of its exploration properties in Cote d'Ivoire to the Atlantic Group for total consideration of up to $305 million. The consideration is composed of a cash consideration of $192 million, inclusive of a $23 million shareholder loan repayment within 6 months of closing, and contingent cash payments totaling up to $113 million, payable based on the price of gold over 2.5 years and resource conversions over 5 years. The French President Emmanuel Macron has given his outgoing Prime Minister 48 hours in which to reach a deal to form a government. This is after Sébastien Lecornu resigned suddenly after 26 days in the office. His shock resignation announcement drove stocks and the euro sharply lower. The BBC's Katia Adler has the details.
France's reputation has been flagging, at least in EU circles, for quite some time now, because of its finances, but also international disquiet at growing support for the hard right and left here. President Macron had promised the French and his European partners he'd turn all that around. As the Eurozone's second biggest economy, what happens in France affects the credibility of the currency as a whole. But he failed. The resignation of his fifth prime minister in 2 years was just the most recent humiliation for Macronisme, once heralded as Mr. Macron's recipe for France's success.
$1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,467 naira in Botswana 13 pula 20. Kenya, the dollar is 128 shilling 329. Zambia 23 kwacha 80. BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is at 5.32. Russia 82 rubles 59. India 88 rupees 74. China 71.14. South Africa 17 rand 22 cents. $1 is 74 pence to the British pound, 85 to the euro. Commodities, gold is at $3,961, platinum at $1,618 per ounce, the price of Brent crude oil at $65.71 a barrel. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chandruko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Israeli and Hamas officials are in the Egyptian resort city of Sharm el-Sheikh to engage in talks that could end the war in Gaza and release all the hostages. The talks come in the middle of the eve of the second anniversary of Hamas attacks on Israel and the beginning of the war in Gaza that has largely decimated the enclave. Hamas on Friday gave an affirmative response to US President Donald Trump's peace proposal, but it's unclear to the extent at which the group would embrace all the 20 points in Trump's proposal. Sherwin Bryce-Weiss picks up the story.
As the negotiating teams now seek to establish an agreed pathway forward on the hostage exchange and a ceasefire in Gaza, nothing is certain as mediation has often come up short in bringing this conflict to an end. But US President Donald Trump has struck an optimistic tone.
It's a great deal for Israel, and it's a great deal for everybody. And you want to get your hostages back, right? You want them back, or do you not want them back? And it's a great deal for Israel. It's a great deal for the entire Arab world, Muslim world, and world. So we're very happy about it. When do you think the hostages will start being paid? I think very soon. They're in negotiation right now as we speak. They've started the negotiation. It'll last a couple of days. We'll see how it turns out, but I'm hearing it's going very well.
And after numerous failed attempts at reaching a truce between the warring parties, contentious issues remain beyond a hostage exchange, including Hamas disarming, Israel's withdrawal from Gaza, and the group's future role in the occupied Palestinian territory. Amjad Iraqi is a senior analyst with the International Crisis Group.
I think Trump really has his work cut out in the sense that he needs to prove to everybody in the region, not just to Hamas, to the Israelis, but also to the Arab states, that he is ready to apply that necessary pressure. If he is seriously invested in the plan that he announced on Monday and asserts it more as his own plan, even though it's, of course, one that's constructed by multiple actors, if he wants to show that investment, then he needs to be serious about backing it up. I think that if this initiative fails, for all its faults, at least in focusing on the ceasefire terms, and then leaving the day after questions for later, as long as he's open for that and is willing to pull the muscle behind it, then I think we can actually see the U.S. play that constructive role to at least provide a better path than we've had up until now, which has only been more and more cover for Israel's assault on Gaza and even the potential expulsion of Gazans.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu indicated over the weekend that they were on the verge of a significant achievement.
It's not final yet. We are working on it diligently, and I hope, God willing, that in the coming days, even during the Sukkot holiday, I will be able to announce the return of all our hostages, both the living and the fallen, in one phase, with the IDF remaining in the depth of the Strip and in the areas that control it. In the first stage, Hamas will release all our hostages, and IDF forces will be redeployed in a way that the IDF continues to hold all the areas that control the depth of the Strip. In the second phase, Hamas will be disarmed and the Gaza Strip will be demilitarized. This will happen either through diplomatic means, according to the Trump plan, or militarily, by us. I said this in Washington as well.
The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has urged the parties to seize the opportunity to bring the tragic conflict in Gaza to an end. His spokesperson, Stefan Dujarric.
I think the Secretary-General recalls with much pain the devastation in Israel due to the terror attacks by Hamas and others on 7th of October 2 years ago. We have seen in the ensuing time the devastation and the pain to civilians. We now have there is a window that has been presented, and we want that window to be that opportunity to be seized to bring an end to this conflict. There are thousands of metric tons in the pipeline of goods ready to enter, whether they're the port of Ashdod, whether they're in Jordan and other places. And as soon as the crossings become open, we're ready to move those trucks.
As a much hoped for ceasefire in Gaza and the release of the hostages after 2 years in captivity beckons, anticipation grows that this could be a pivotal moment on a pathway to peace. That will be up to the negotiators, who must agree on the parameters of any future deal and the pressure exerted on both sides on the compromises required. And as we this week mark the 2-year anniversary of the October 7th attacks and the subsequent war in Gaza, the road ahead remains uncertain at best. I'm Sherwin Bryce-Pease in New York.
Postpartum hemorrhage, that's what we're talking about now. This is severe bleeding after childbirth, and it is the leading cause of maternal deaths globally, claiming nearly 45,000 lives each year. New guidelines from the World Health Organization, or WHO, International Federation of Gynecology and Obstetrics, or FIGO, and the International Confederation of Midwives, or ICM, launched this week, aim to detect and treat this complication faster and prevent it wherever possible. With us now to explain what these recommendations mean for women and healthcare workers worldwide is Dr. Femi Oladapo, head of the Maternal and Perinatal Health Unit at WHO. Dr. Oladapo, thank you for joining us. How are you this morning?
I'm very well. Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show.
Our pleasure. Why did the World Health Organization feel that it is important to update the guidelines on postpartum bleeding at this particular juncture?
I think there are multiple reasons. First of all, science is dynamic and it's not static. So the research evidence that underpins WHO guidelines continuously change, and therefore WHO has a responsibility to react to new evidence. However, the main trigger for this particular one was the postpartum hemorrhage summit that was held in Dubai in 2023, where stakeholders from more than 50 countries agreed that a major issue for clinical guidance was the inconsistencies among guideline developers. And therefore, WHO, International Confederation of Midwives, and the International Federation of Gynecology and Obstetrics, FIGO, decided to come together to issue a singular set of guidelines for postpartum hemorrhage. So we started working together over the past 2 years, and this just happened to be published 2 days ago.
You're calling for the rapid detection or a quicker earlier detection of postpartum hemorrhage. So what should doctors and midwives be looking for?
Very good question. It's interesting to know that for the last century or so, we have defined a condition by the amount of blood loss, but despite that, we don't measure blood loss. So in the current situation, what we want doctors and midwives to do is that they should measure blood loss using a calibrated drip, not just rely on guesswork, and they should watch for early signs such as a racing pulse or dropping in the blood pressure of the woman. And once about 300 mils of blood is lost and any abnormal vital signs appear, they should act immediately. So that combination of objective measurement and quick response will prevent situations becoming very critical.
Talk to us about the approach called the motive bundle. Can you explain what this is and how it works?
It's a bundle of care that one applies as soon as the diagnosis of postpartum hemorrhage is made. The motive is an acronym for massaging of the uterus. The M stands for massage the uterus. The O stands for oxytocin. You give an oxytocin drug. The T stands for TXA, is tranexamic acid. We give tranexamic acid by intravenously. The I stands for eye intravenous fluid, so you start intravenous fluid. The V stands for examination, the E stands for examination of vaginal and genital tears, and then E stands for escalation. If bleeding continues, or you call for help, or blood or surgery, as the case may be.
So how preventable is postpartum bleeding, and what should one do during pregnancy and after giving birth to lower the risk of severe bleeding?
So I think that what we see when bleeding happens during childbirth is a combination of several things that has happened during pregnancy. So first of all, we start with prevention. We treat anemia with iron and folic acid orally if the woman can tolerate it, or intravenous iron when oral tablets is not sufficient to do the job. And during birth, as soon as the baby comes out, or just before the baby comes out, we have to give a quality assured deuterotonics like oxytocin to help the woman's womb to contract and stop the bleeding. Or in cases where they do not have good refrigeration, you can use stable carboxytocin, or a tablet called misoprostol in a situation where injections cannot be given, or they don't have healthcare providers, or we don't have good refrigeration. And importantly, we should also avoid unnecessary interventions like episiotomy, which is a kind of cut that is given to the woman to widen the genital area during birth to just prevent unnecessary trauma.
Dr. Oladapo, we're going to leave it there for now. Thank you so much for educating us on this important matter.
Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Dr. Femi Oladapo from the World Health Organization explaining the newly released global guidelines on postpartum hemorrhage, the leading cause of maternal deaths worldwide. When was it when we were talking about blood donation? And I think we mentioned that we hardly think of pregnant women or women who need to give birth as needing those donated blood samples or bags. Yeah, because some, especially in the rural areas, some women don't have access to proactive healthcare, and they'd rather, be reactive in whatever the problems that arise. Interesting one there.
Yes, indeed. Very desperate situation there. And so if you can donate blood, please do so. You're genuinely saving real lives.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
The South African men's under-20 football team, Amajita, are through to the knockout round of the FIFA Under-20 World Cup. Be with us this Wednesday at 21:30 Central African Time when Amajita face Colombia, streaming live on SABC+. And there's more, with other Under-20 World Cup matches are streaming also live on SABC+, with selected fixtures on SABC Sports Channel and SABC1. Wave the flag, Mzansi, stand up for Amajita, FIFA Under-20 World Cup. Amajita coverage on SABC+, powered by SABC Sport. Right, it is 8 o'clock, which means it's time for the final hour of Rise and Shine right here on Channel Africa, where we bring you the African perspective, broadcasting live from our studios in Johannesburg in South Africa, streaming on www.channelafrica.co.za. And I am the prodigal son returned, revived, Peter Ndoro.
At Channel Africa 1 is our handle across our various social media networks. Do get in touch with us. My name is Asanda, Beda. In this hour, we take a look at the ongoing South Africa-Uganda Disability Inclusion Study Tour and hearing from Uganda's Minister of State for Disability Affairs, Asamo Helen Grace, as well as looking at our own Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities in terms of what their contributions have been on this meeting. So all that story, of course, and more will be coming up in this hour. We say good morning first, though. Here's Onele Nsinzi with the news. We say good morning to her, as well as Musibudi Makura, who will follow with sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. The International Criminal Court has convicted the first Janjaweed militia leader put on trial for atrocities committed in Sudan's Darfur region more than 20 years ago. The court found Ali Muhammad Al-Rahman guilty of 27 counts of crimes against humanity and war crimes, including rape, murder, and persecution. His sentence will be determined at a later date after a new round of hearings. The conviction is the first and only trial looking at crimes in Sudan since the case was referred to the court by the United Nations Security Council in 2005. Madagascar's President Andre Rajoelina has named Army General Rafin Fortunate Zafisambo as Prime Minister. This comes a week after dissolving the government in response to ongoing protests over power and water shortages. Zafisambo replaced Prime Minister Christian Nsei, who was dismissed as part of the president's move. The general was the director of the military cabinet in the prime minister's office until his appointment. Ahead of naming him, Rajoelina said the country needed a prime minister capable of restoring order and the people's trust. Earlier yesterday, protesters returned to the streets in the African island nation for a third week of anti-government demonstrations. South Africa's KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi is set to appear before Parliament's ad hoc committee today. The committee has been set up to investigate Mkhwanazi's allegations, which include corruption, political interference and criminal infiltration of the justice system. Parliament has appointed Advocate Norman Arendse as its evidence leader. Mkhwanazi will be the first senior police official to appear before the committee. The U.S. has deported 10 people to Eswatini, despite rights groups in the southern African state mounting legal action to block the plan. This is the second batch of deportees that the Trump administration has sent to Eswatini as part of its hard-line approach towards immigration. Eswatini's prison department in a statement said that the 10 have been surely accommodated and posed no threat to the public. Eswatini human rights lawyer Mzwandile Masuku told the BBC that he was shocked and dismayed by that the government had taken in the group despite an ongoing court case against the arrival of 5 deportees in July. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for the unconditional release of all Israeli hostages. He has also described the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza as being on a scale that defies comprehension. Sharon Bryce Peace reports.
Guterres called the Hamas-led attack on Israel 2 years ago abhorrent and urged that the day be used to remember all those who were killed and suffered horrific violence. He also called for an end to civilians paying with their lives and their futures, while welcoming US President Donald Trump's peace proposal as an opportunity to bring the tragic conflict to an end. The UN chief said a permanent ceasefire and a credible political process were essential to prevent further bloodshed and pave the way for a peace in which Israelis, Palestinians, and all the peoples of the region could live side by side in security, dignity, and mutual respect. Sherman Riceby's SABC News, New York.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Bafana know that 6 points will secure them a place in next year's FIFA World Cup, while the ATP open a heat policy after a string of retirements in the Shanghai heat. I'll tell you why at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Uganda's Minister of State for Disability Affairs, Asamo Helen Grace, has praised South Africa's efforts in promoting disability inclusion and social protection, saying Uganda hopes to learn valuable lessons to strengthen its own systems. She was speaking at the ongoing South Africa-Uganda Disability Inclusion Study Tour. Minister Grace said her delegation aims to study South Africa's social protection strategies, including the Disability Grant and Care Dependency Grant, to better support vulnerable groups back home. Michael Mbewe filed this report.
The South Africa-Uganda Disability Inclusion Study Tour brings together government officials and disability advocates from both countries to share experiences and strengthen cooperation on disability-inclusive social protection. Set for 4 days, the program focuses on learning from South Africa's successful models such as the Disability Grant and Care Dependency Grant, while exploring ways to enhance Uganda's own disability and social welfare policies. It aims to promote inclusive development, improve policy implementation, and ensure that people with disabilities are fully integrated into national development agendas. Uganda's Minister of State for Disability Affairs, Asamo Helen Grace, expressed the following.
So particularly we have come here to learn more about the social protection strategies that South Africa does in supporting their people, because we know that they have a social protection mechanism which takes care of the people who are poor, people with disabilities, old people, people who don't have homes. And we want to learn those lessons and try to take them back home and see if we can put them into our policies and thereafter, of course, implement them. We are also starting what we call a child benefit program. And in that child benefit program, where a child with disabilities is really having multiple disabilities, are we able to tap into some knowledge in South Africa that we can be able to push back home and see that people with disabilities in totality are included? We're looking at the health sector. We're also going to discuss issues of education, inclusivity, because we have laws, we have policies, but they are not yet to the level of implementation.
Minister Grace emphasized on integrating disability into all national development programs, ensuring that people with disabilities are fully included in Uganda's growth agenda, in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Leave no one behind, acting as among the first countries to sign the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities.
Coming from the cabinet of the president, we come in and appreciate the role of South Africa. South Africa, in terms of disability with Uganda, we are among the first countries to sign the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. We also came with a specific law for people with disabilities. But now we realize that having a specific law still brings exclusion. So we need to see how do we integrate disability as a progressive development program to include in all the programs that government has. Talk for Uganda, 16% of the population is disabled people. You can't ignore that population. This is a big population that should be included into the development agenda. And since we are signatories to the SDGs, we are saying leave no one behind, include people with disabilities, and ensure that we become part and parcel of the development program.
A person living with disability herself, Minister Grace stresses the need to change negative social attitudes towards people with disabilities, saying society must recognize their ability and potential, not their limitations.
You know, issues of disability start right from society where we are born, right from our homes, that there's always a negative attitude towards a child with disability. Disability has broken marriages. You find the men run away and leave the woman. When it comes to employment, people look at a disabled person as a person who cannot work. So they judge you by your looks. They don't want to ask you questions. You come to a situation where you're a politician like me. People can't imagine we have a minister who is disabled, though she's for disability. So people ask, but why did the president want on a disabled one? They do not know that you have the capacity to do what any other person would do. So these negative challenges, negative attitudes we have in society, we need to demonstrate to the society that we are able.
Minister Grace commended both South Africa's presidential commitment to disability inclusion and President Museveni's personal support, noting that leadership understanding is key to driving real change.
I admire South Africa because issues of disability are in the presidency. And we are told that the president meets the disabled people once in a year. That means that he listens and takes them as a people. And I think this is a good lesson that we now take. I want to thank my president. He's the only advocate, mostly in parliament, in the cabinet, who listens to me and says, okay, I think this is something which is correct. But because he also has a sister with disability, so he begins to appreciate that, oh, I had my sister, she had polio, but she's not useless. So that one, he understands the assignment. So whatever programs we have done, he has been one of the persons on the forefront.
South Africa's Director General for Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, Mikateko Joyce Maluleke, highlighted that the visit gives life to an existing bilateral agreement between the two countries, strengthening cooperation and disability inclusion and shared development goals.
This event is very important for the Department of Women, Youth and persons with disabilities. In 2003, the president of Uganda visited South Africa. Meetings where the president would meet with a president of another country, they call them biannual. And in that meeting, as the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, we signed an MOU with the minister from Uganda who's responsible for disability in order for us to share experiences, to cooperate in many different areas. So them coming here today and us having these two task teams from South Africa and from Uganda to come and share experiences on disability, we are operationalizing the MOU that we have signed with them.
Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
So we've just heard there that was South Africa's. In fact, we continue with this conversation. Let me put my glasses on for a start. That should assist us there. We continue now with this conversation. We've just heard there South Africa Uganda Disability Inclusion Study Tour, which brings together government officials and disability advocates from both countries to share experiences and strengthen cooperation on disability inclusive social protection, which is currently underway. And to take this conversation a little further and to better understand South Africa's priorities in advancing disability inclusion, we're now joined by the Minister for Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities in South Africa, Honourable Sindisiwe Chikunga. Minister, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much, Peter, for having us, and good morning to your viewers.
So, Minister, we were just listening there to Uganda's minister praising South Africa's various programs, its model of social protection, especially the disability and care dependency grants. How significant is this collaboration between South Africa and Uganda, particularly when it comes to strengthening disability and inclusive development?
We have the relationship, long-standing relationship with Uganda. It started in 1994, but of course even before 1994. And of course, like the DG indicated, in 2023, the president of Uganda came to South Africa at the invitation by our President Cyril Ramaphosa. And there was this MOU that was signed. Sometimes when you look at MOUs that get signed, they will not talk to issues that are social in nature. But this one was signed on the field of women, youth, and persons with disabilities. And it covered quite a number of areas, including the area of disability inclusion. And in South Africa, that first is in the Constitution, the issue of equality, irrespective of ability or disability, sexual orientation as such, it is in the Constitution. But indeed, we also signed the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. It therefore made us as South Africa to then draft our own policy on the rights of persons with disabilities, localizing the UN one in South Africa. And if you look at it, as the minister was saying, the IMC, that is Interministerial Committee, was also established, and it is chaired not by the minister but by the president himself, which elevate the matter of disability to the level of the president. And that is why we are able to look at the pillars of our policy and say which one are we implementing, which one are we lagging behind, and why. And if you look at other important things that have happened, is the establishment of the department itself, that ensures that it advocates, it mainstreams, it monitors, it evaluates issues, including issues of disability inclusion. So this visit, benchmarking visit by Uganda, one enables us to look at ourselves, because we have got to share information with them. But of course, to say how far are we as South Africa, but how far are we in the implementation of some of the issues that are in that MOU that we signed, but also to learn from them, because definitely there are things that we are going to learn as we share experiences with them. Yesterday, when we were addressing them and looking at our 8 pillars of our white paper or policy, they actually were writing and looking at the pillars, what they cover. And if you look at them, for instance, the pillar one is on protection and promotion of the rights of persons with disabilities. And this is an important one because we have got to look and say, how far are we in that regard? And we said, we have a department that ensures that these rights are protected, and we insist on that by other departments. If you look at pillar number 3, for instance, because there are quite a number of them, it talks to promotion and promoting access to services. And these services, they talk to education, they talk to health, they talk to transport, universal access, etc., etc. And we can sit down and say, when it comes to health, for instance, are persons with disabilities in South Africa accessing it? And we can say yes, we can say, but there's room for improvement. If we look at education, for instance, we say are persons with disabilities in South Africa accessing that? And we can therefore share experiences to say, for instance, we introduced the universal access to education, but the challenges were that teachers were not trained to deal with persons with disabilities, for instance, with people who might have problems of sight. You'd find that in a school there's no one who can actually look at that and be able to teach them. So these were the challenges, and therefore we still continue with the special schools, which sometimes exclude persons with disabilities and isolate them. And we therefore can share experiences as to what it is that they are doing in Uganda and what it is that we are doing in South Africa in trying to deal with that challenge. You look at the issues, for instance, of transport access, for instance. You think about people on wheelchairs that will complain sometimes to say, we pay for wheelchairs and ourselves, and how best do we address that? We can learn from each other to say, what is it that they are doing? How do they involve the operators, for instance, transport operators, so that even persons with disabilities can have access? You look at the aviation, you look at maritime, you look at rail, etc., etc. So these are the things that we are sharing with, but also giving us time as South Africa to look at ourselves, to do introspection as we share with them our experiences.
You talked about learning there, and I just wonder, South Africa's social protection system for persons with disabilities is often regarded as quite a model for the continent. What would you say are some of the strongest features that other countries perhaps can learn from South Africa that we seem to be doing well?
We are doing well when it comes to social protection, even of persons with disabilities. We, as a department, we say disability is not equivalent to a grant. There are persons with disabilities that do not need any grant because they too can participate actively in the economy of the country. They can work, they can be employed, and that is why we've got Employment Equity Act in South Africa that demands government and private sector to employ persons with disabilities so that they don't have to qualify for just to get grants. However, there are persons with disabilities that definitely require grants, and these are actually protected and are covered in that form of social protection. And if you check, even the minister was sharing something that says for them it's like you have got to reach a particular age in order, even if you have a disability, in order for you to qualify for a grant. And it was also like, if you look at their social protection age, if I'm correct, she was talking about 8 years and so forth. In South Africa, at 60 years you qualify for a grant because there is an element of some disability that can creep in there, but of course you are a retired person or a pensioner at that stage. But persons with disabilities, irrespective of age in South Africa, if the disability makes a person, renders a person not able to participate actively in the economy, then of course they qualify for grants. And this is a model that you're not going to get in the continent, but it's a model that you're not even going to get in other developed parts of the world. And therefore it is the best because it takes care of its persons with disabilities. But we do not sometimes talk about those that become disabled because of road accidents that also get protection and compensation from road accident fund. If you look at it, it is still part of social protection in that the road accident fund will also compensate them, but also provide them with assistive devices, with, for instance, care, provide them with people that can take care of them, which also is the case with the social protection that is being rendered by the Department of Social Development. So yes, we're sharing that. In fact, they were surprised. They looked at the amount that is being spent by South Africa, and I think that will also be the focus today by South Africa on social protection. And it is something that we are celebrating for our persons with disabilities because it gives them that ability and that right to live like any other person. Whilst we say any disability should be evaluated and assessed so that we say on the basis of this disability, this person does require a grant, but it should not be like once a person has a disability, then we say we equate any disability to grant. Persons who can see, persons who cannot hear, persons who cannot walk, but they are able to do the work and they are able to achieve in education. And in the department here, we have a doctor who can't see. She's PhD and she's doing exceptionally good. So it's possible for persons with disabilities to go to school, to participate actively in the economy and to earn a living. Young persons with disabilities, they want to participate in the growing of the economy of South Africa, then to just equate them to a grant. But however, there will be those that will qualify to get a grant. And of course, the system in South Africa allows them to do that.
Minister, the Ugandan delegation also spoke about the importance of integrating disability across all national development programs. And I'm wondering how South Africa is ensuring that disability inclusion is mainstreamed across all sectors like education, health and employment. You may have partly answered this question, though.
In fact, that is the mandate of the department, and that is why the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities exists. Its mandate is to ensure coordination of work of all departments, of all sectors, of all civil society, private sector per se. Looking at persons with disabilities, we have a responsibility to advocate. We have a responsibility to mainstream. So when the government or cabinet is sitting, for instance, to adopt its medium-term development policy, we look at whether that features in all sectors, in all departments, the inclusion of persons with disabilities. When policies are presented, we are there to say where are the persons with disabilities. When ministers, for instance, present boards that they are appointing, our presence there is to say, do we have a person with disabilities in your board, minister? And it is now a convention that any minister that brings a board to cabinet for approval, that board must have a person with disabilities. That is our core mandate. If it doesn't happen, it might actually mean that as a department we are failing. And we do that not only within the public service, but even in the private sector, in the civil society, etc., etc. We are there to ensure that persons with disabilities, and that is why looking at our G20 legacy projects, one of them is the NEF Center that we would wish to establish for persons with disabilities to ensure that we have a proper database for persons with disabilities. We know where they are, we know what they are doing, and also maybe to look at, to include other departments. We've been raising and interacting with the Department of Health to say would want to see persons with disabilities being identified at birth so that we are able to plan better for a person from birth until death, so that it doesn't have to happen that they get identified when they go to a crèche or ECD, etc., etc., because it means there's time where we're not able to plan for that with disability like any other child who is born without disability. But we know that this child will go to a crèche, and therefore there must be crèches. They will go to ECT, there must be ECTs. They will go to school. We must be able also to say from birth, this child will require a special school or a normal, a universal school, and plan for that child and look at the number of special schools that we have, so that we're able to increase and attend to the infrastructure and the resources that are required on the basis of the child that we'll have known about from birth until death. And these are the issues that we are discussing. And we think that if we're to have that nerve center and there are people that are to establish it, we believe that we'll therefore be able to have and to capture this information as a department. So yes, indeed, the issue of streamlining, the issue of coordinating, the issue of advocating, the issue of monitoring, the issue of evaluating, it is our mandate as a department.
This study tour is about learning and sharing. What has struck you the most about Uganda and what they're doing well that perhaps South Africa can think about adopting?
For the very fact that the minister is with the disability, it is encouraging. In our meeting yesterday, they did not cover a lot, but of course we also had to leave because we had other commitments. But I believe that they have a budget. That's what the minister indicated to us, that they get a budget like other departments, and therefore from their side as a department, they are able to intervene. And I think that is what is missing in South Africa, that we are only intervening, we're only dependent on everybody else. Even where we believe we could intervene as a department, we cannot, because our resources are such that we can't intervene. I'm just going to make an example. We have quite a number of institutions of persons with disabilities or organizations. They will say, Minister, we need wheelchairs. And for wheelchairs, we are dependent wholly on the Department of Health. But we believe, or if it is, of course, a person who became disabled because of accidents, motor vehicle accidents, then of course it will be road accident fund. But otherwise, you think that if we had a budget for intervening like other governments do, if you go to Italy, for instance, the minister has a budget and she's responsible for disability and disability only, and she's running projects herself, we would have moved much faster on things. And I think that is where we can learn from Uganda. You are able to come with projects, for instance, that is looking at technology to say, how best can we use technology for persons with disabilities? If you look in South Africa, you cannot think of any department that will provide technology and look at technology for persons with disabilities, making it possible for them to participate better than if they don't have those. So these are the things that I think we're learning from them, but from other countries as well. From Brazil, for instance, if I were to quote, they do have budget for the minister in the responsible for persons with disabilities or disability inclusion to intervene and to have projects that herself is implementing and running with. In South Africa, there are things that you cannot locate, even if you want to mainstream or to advocate, but you don't know where to go, because where do you go, for instance, for technology that can assist persons who are deaf for them to be able to see from their cell phones and out of that actually be able to understand what is being spoken in the room, who can intervene in that. And therefore, those are the things that we think we're learning from Uganda.
Minister, we wish you the best in terms of the rest of this tour and the deliberations between you and Uganda. And we thank you so much indeed for joining us on Channel Africa this morning.
Thank you very much, Peter, for having us.
Thank you very much. That's South Africa's Minister of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, Honourable Sindisiwe Chikunga, talking to us about this collaboration between Uganda and South Africa in this sector. It's time for your news headlines. Here's Onele Nsinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. The International Criminal Court has convicted the first Janjaweed militia leader put on trial for atrocities committed in Sudan's Darfur region more than 20 years ago. The court found Ali Muhammad Ali Rahman guilty of 27 counts of crimes against humanity and war crimes. South Africa's KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi is set to appear before Parliament's ad hoc committee today. The committee has been set up to investigate Mkhwanazi's allegations, which include corruption, political interference and criminal infiltration of the justice system. And police in London say they've dismantled an international gang that has smuggled 40,000 stolen mobile phones to China. The Mayor Sadiq Khan called it the biggest operation of its kind in Britain. Channel Africa News, I am Onele Nsinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's find out what's happening in the world of sports now as we say good morning again to Musubudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Asanda. So Hugo Bruce, the head coach of the South African men's national football team, Bafana Bafana, has confirmed that Kaizer Chiefs attacker Mduduzi Shabalala has replaced Orlando Pirates star player Relebohile Mofokeng, who got injured this past weekend while on club duty in the Carling Knockout Cup competition against Siwelele FC. Now, Shabalala was part of the previous camp last month when Bafana Bafana played Lesotho as well as Nigeria in the FIFA 2026 World Cup qualifiers. So for these crucial last two matches of the qualification campaign against Zimbabwe as well as Rwanda, Bruce has a solid and a balanced squad.
Really Mofokeng, because of the injury he got on Saturday, and we replaced him by Shabalala. Secondly, there are still two players who didn't arrive because they played yesterday. That was Foster and Sitole. So they will arrive tomorrow morning, and tomorrow afternoon we will be complete to do the training.
So this is probably Bruce's biggest week as a Bafana Bafana coach as he aims now to take South Africa to the FIFA World Cup, a tournament they have not qualified for directly since 2002. So with the deduction of 3 points by FIFA, which has now seen them sitting behind Benin on goal difference and second position in Group C. Bruce has reiterated now that this changes nothing for them going forward in the last two matches remaining in these qualifiers.
I don't have to tell you that maybe the next games are historical. Everybody knows that it's 24 years ago that South Africa could qualify for World Cup. So our situation is a little bit changed because of the deduction of 3 points, but that's the only change. Even with 3 points ahead, we had to win our two last games to be mathematically sure to be qualified. So
On to tennis news now. The governing body of the men's tennis could consider a formal heat rule after a string of retirements at the Shanghai Masters this week blew the draw wide open, with top players wilting under soaring temperatures as well as punishing humidity. The world number 2 Yannick Sinner's title defense ended in agony on Sunday when the Italian struggled to walk due to a cramp in his right thigh before he retired in the third and deciding set against Talun Griekspoor of the Netherlands. Novak Djokovic, meanwhile, vomited during his encounter with Yannick Sinner, while Holger Rune was heard asking an official during a medical timeout in his meeting with Ugo Humbert if players had to die on court amid heat as well as humidity issues in the city of Shanghai. Meanwhile, qualifier Katarina Sinikova continued her impressive run at the Wuhan Open, defeating 15-seed Diana Schneider in straight sets of 6-4, 6-4 yesterday. It also marks her fourth top 20 win of 2025 and a second on the Asian swing, underscoring a strong late-season resurgence. Sinikova, who came through the qualifying with back-to-back wins, showed composure as well as tactical variety to outplay the higher-ranked Schneider and level her head-to-head at 1-1. She will now face American rising star Maya Joint in the round of 32 with momentum firmly on her side. And finally, South African Paralympian Puseletso Mabote is thrilled after winning gold at the World Para-Athletics Championships in the T63 men's 100-meter event in New Delhi, India over the weekend. Mabote equaled the world champs record with a time of 12.03 seconds. Now, Team South Africa now has 4 medals, with Simone Kruger also clinching the gold in the F38 discus event, and Cheryl James as well as Colin Malalela winning bronze in the T37 400-meter and T47 400-meter respectively. Mabote says this achievement is life-changing for him.
Being world champion this year has given me a sense of pride and a sense of contentness. I'm happy to be in the position that I'm in and glad to be in the position to be world champion, and I've been given the chance to compete at such a high level.
All right, so it's 8:37 a.m. Central African Time, and concludes your sports news this morning on Africa Rise and Shine. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. I'm back with more sports news with the On The Move team in the next hour. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Yo. Listen up. Channel Africa is taking the digital game higher. Check it out. We are taking our digital platforms to the next level for you, our loyal listeners. You know where we at, right? New website, a fresh new app, and they're on fire. Anytime, anywhere listening, Channel Africa brings the African sound to you.
It's the bomb, yo.
Stay locked. The future is crystal clear with us. Your new way to experience Channel Africa is almost here. Africa, stand tall and get ready.
Let's check in with the world of business now. We say good morning again to Chandugo Ligege with our economics news.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. The World Bank says sub-Saharan African economies are expected to grow by a faster 3.8% this year on the back of stable prices that have spurred easing by policymakers, and the momentum will increase in the next 2 years. In its biannual Africa Pulse report, the bank says the upgrade from 3.5% in April was driven by stabilizing foreign exchange and inflation rates in countries like Ethiopia, giving room for interest rate cuts. The bank says the growth will accelerate to an annual average of 4.4% in the next 2 years, slightly up from an initial forecast of 4.3%. 30 South African agro-processing companies are showcasing their products at the Anuga International Trade Fair in Cologne, Germany. The trade fair started on the 4th of this month and is scheduled to end tomorrow. South Africa's Deputy Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Zuko Godlimbi, says the trade fair will assist companies in exploring new markets for their products, as well as South Africa's export market diversification initiatives. Chief Director of Export Promotion and Marketing at the department, Zanele Sani.
I think what we've done with the companies that are showcasing there is really maximize what South Africa's capabilities are. So I've just mentioned the rooibos because that's unique to South Africa. We have companies that are providing sauces, canned vegetables, so companies like Dursots, which are very famous in South Africa. We've also got companies that are providing uniquely blended chili oil, that is companies coming from Stellenbosch.
MTN's Zakhele Futhi, the special purpose empowerment vehicle of the mobile operator, has issued a further cautionary announcement to shareholders regarding the planned unwind of the scheme. In a cautionary note to investors, the board says it is still in the process of finalizing the approach it will use to unwind and the return of the residual net asset value to shareholders. It says the final amount to be distributed depends on the costs of the unwind and provisions for any associated liabilities that may arise after the process is implemented. SABC News economist reporter Nosipo Khadebe has more.
In July, MTN announced that each shareholder will get 20 Rand per share from the scheme, with a further 2 to 3 Rand per share expected later. The total amount of 22 to 23 Rand per share would represent a full return of the original investment and a modest gain. The scheme, meant to empower black investors in the MTN business, was launched in 2016, backed by external funding. Nosipo Khadebe, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Trade Union Congress of South African Trade Unions, COSATU, in the Western Cape Province will today march to Parliament against retrenchments, weak economic growth and the rising cost of living. The Labour Federation will hand over a memorandum to the parliamentary authorities. COSATU's Provincial Secretary Malvin de Bruyn says they will also march to the Cape Town Civic Centre to hand over another memorandum on high electricity and water tariffs to the city's mayor.
Now we are saying that the people of the Western Cape are unhappy about what's happening in our province and in our city. Hence the call for members to come in the numbers to support the call of COSATU to protest against what's currently happening.
The Brazilian government says President Lula da Silva has held a video call with President Donald Trump of the U.S., the first meeting since the U.S. imposed tariffs of 50% on Brazilian goods. The BBC's Mimi Swabi has the details.
In a 30-minute call described as positive, President Lula da Silva asked his US counterpart to reduce his import taxes to 10%. No answer was given straight away, but Mr. Trump has appointed America's top diplomat, Marco Rubio, to continue negotiations with Brazil's vice president. Both leaders exchanged phone numbers to maintain direct contact, marking a definite thaw in relations. Ties soured dramatically after Mr. Trump accused Brazilian officials of a witch hunt against his right-wing ally, the former president, Jair Bolsonaro, who's been found guilty of plotting a coup following his 2022 election loss.
Financial indicators at this hour: $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,467 naira, Botswana 13 pula 20, Kenya the dollar is 128 shilling 329, Zambia 23 kwacha 80. BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is at 5.32, Russia 82 rubles 59, India 88 rupees 74, China 71.14, South Africa 17 rand 22 cents. $1 is 74 pence to the British pound, 85 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is at $3,964, platinum at $1,623 per ounce, the price of Brent crude oil at $65.75 a barrel. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chandruko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Amajita are through to the knockout round of the FIFA Under-20 World Cup. Be with us this Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. as South Africa's Under-20s face Colombia, streaming live on SABC+. And there's more. Other Under-20 World Cup matches are streaming live on SABC+, with selected fixtures on SABC Sport Channel and SABC1. Wave the flag, Mzansi, stand up for Amajita. FIFA Under-20 World Cup Amajita coverage on SABC Plus, powered by SABC Sports.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
South Africa's commercial bank, African Bank, has launched its first sustainable bond, raising about $40.7 million to boost funding for small, medium and micro enterprises, SMMEs. Channel Africa's economics reporter Innocent Samosa sat down with the bank's Chief of Transformation and Sustainability, Edna Monche, who explained how the funds will directly support SMMEs, especially those driving inclusive and sustainable growth.
The 700 million raised is ring-fenced for financing micro, small and medium enterprises, which are the engine of job creation in South Africa. Our priority as African Bank is to fund MSMEs that are driving inclusive growth, such as those creating employment in townships, women-owned enterprises, and businesses supporting local supply chains. This financing will not only give them access to working capital, but also help them expand, digitize, and build resilience in a challenging economic environment. By focusing on this segment, as African Bank, we're ensuring that growth is broad-based and transformative, not just concentrated among big corporates.
Edna, you and I can agree that many small businesses struggle with access to affordable finance. The question then is, how does this bond address those barriers, and what makes it different from traditional funding models?
Traditionally, many MSMEs are excluded due to lack of collateral or lengthy credit histories. African Bank prides itself in being the bank that backs MSMEs. Therefore, through the Green, Social and Sustainability Bond, we can provide more accessible and affordable lending products designed with flexible criteria that recognize realities of small businesses. The sustainable bond proceeds lower our cost of funding, and that really benefits the entrepreneurs in the form of more competitive rates and fit-for-purpose products. Unlike traditional models, this initiative is not just about credit. It's really about enabling MSMEs to scale, create jobs, and build long-term sustainability.
Sustainability is at the core of this initiative. What criteria or benchmarks will African Bank use to ensure the funds are really channeled into projects that are truly advancing transformation and sustainability?
The African Bank Sustainable Finance Framework sets out clear eligibility criteria, with the first focus on MSME financing and a pathway to support green and social projects such as renewable energy, affordable housing, and gender-focused enterprises. We are aligning with global best practice, the ICMA Green, Social and Sustainability Bond Principles, and our framework have been independently reviewed with a second-party opinion. Impact will be measured against specific transparent indicators such as jobs created, the MSMEs supported, percentage of women-owned businesses financed, and measurable contributions to environmental goals. As African Bank, we will publish annual allocation and impact reports verified by independent parties to ensure that the public and investors can track the real difference that African Bank is making through these funds.
From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, Rise and Shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
We get now to this segment of the show on Rise and Shine, where we dedicate to gender-based violence, discussing topics around this all-important issue. This happens on Tuesdays here on Channel Africa on Rise and Shine. So Students at South African universities have to deal with a disturbing reality. They face the threat of violent crime, in particular gender-based violence. They also battle with substandard infrastructure, some of it life-threatening, and institutions aren't ready to respond. This is according to a recent review of health and safety challenges in the country's universities. This study was conducted by academics in environmental health and public health. To chat to us further about the study, we're now joined on the line by Professor Martha Chadiwa, who is head of the Environmental and Occupational Health Unit within the Department of Public Health, the School of Healthcare Sciences at Sefago Makato Health Sciences University. Dr. Chadiwa, thank you for making time for us this morning.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And thank you for discussing this topic, which is actually very important and topical.
Absolutely. Let's start here. Tell us about your study and the kind of picture that it really paints in terms of the violence faced by university students.
So when we started to look at our study, it was just looking at the health and safety aspects and the challenges that South African university students face. And then we were looking at the housing situation, the gender-based violence that had been reported in a lot of news articles, and also the campus crime that the students were also experiencing. So we used the public records that were available from 2015 to 2024. And we also looked at some police reports that were available and university statements that had been released, and also some media coverage over the same period of time. And the aim at the time was to see the patterns of incidents and how universities actually respond to this, because it was painting a gloomy picture, because the incidents were not just isolated, but it was like there was a systematic risk, and we could see that there could be preventable strategies, but it was continuing. So we thought the main aim for students going to university is they need to go and learn. And we were concerned that we don't want parents to send their kids to schools only, or to universities only, to get them back in coffins, or to get them back with mental illness or mental challenges. So we thought safety must be seen as a part of education, because without access to education, then everything is meaningless.
Your study reveals that gender-based violence cases frequently go unreported within universities. Why is this?
Yeah, from the study and from the articles, we saw that there was a lot of fear and stigma and victim blaming from peers if students report this, even staff. And there was a lack of trust in the reporting system, with many feeling as if nothing would be done if they report, and also that the perpetrators were going up unpunished. So students were seeing that even if I report, nothing is going to happen. And in some incidents, there was a report of retaliation and intimidation by the perpetrators. So survivors, they feared for their life, and they feared that they'll be targeted. And also some of the survivors were a bit weak because there was no support system. So the campuses were making it unsafe for them to report these gender-based violence cases.
Student housing or student accommodation, your study highlights that is also a bit problematic. In what way?
So a lot of students, they were struggling to get accommodation close or around our campus, because some of the residents also, they are not authorized. It's not like a university matter. It's people taking into their own hands to provide accommodation for the students. And some of it falls under very unrealistic municipality laws or the public health laws that deal with the accommodation establishment, because nobody really is talking about it and no one is going to do the inspections. So many residents were reported to be overcrowded or poorly maintained, because this is up to the owners of the owner of the accommodation, and also very insecure. So because they just put in a house and there's no security to protect the students. And it brings us to the health and safety legislation, and the requirements under the environmental health laws that need to be abided to, but that were not being abided to. And there are also the requirements for accommodation establishments that we saw that no one was really monitoring under the local governments.
Could we see a scenario where there are satellite offices for the SAPS or the police service being placed within the university campuses themselves, as that being a strategy somewhat of tackling this issue, specifically when it comes to that part of it of unreported or underreported cases?
That would be a scenario that would be perfect. And I think universities should actually embrace that, because the system that is currently, the students are not feeling safe or feeling that they can get help. So maybe if there's the SPS, then that would be better and it would be acceptable.
What are your recommendations then as far as your study in terms of ensuring the safety of especially female students at universities and other institutions of higher learning?
From the study findings, we just saw that there is the need to have strict residence policy or security, and also making sure that there is regular checks to check if the residence is abiding with the local laws and regulations, and stricter searches, and also clear rules on visitors, and also taking information on each visitor that comes into the residence. And there should also be monthly safety evaluations just to check if all residents, including those that are privately owned, if they are accredited to universities. Because if they're accredited to universities, universities will have the mandate to go and check if they're also safe for their students. And also transparency, to publish reports on such major incidents if something happens. If universities can take it upon themselves to report such, and let parents know what is happening, so that when parents also make a decision on where they are going to put their students, they know where to put them, and they know the safety involved if they choose accredited residents. And also to have real-time campus alerts, yes. And like SMS is being sent, and to warn students if there's incidences, so that they can quickly respond, and they can quickly also make decisions on where they are going to go.
Professor Chajigiwa, thank you. We're going to have to leave it there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're completely out of time. But I mean, we continue to cover this topic and we'll continue to have these chats. I think even on the move, Palesa, you've got your own feature that you do on Monday on this. So very important topic again. And thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Martha Chajigiwa, Head of the Environmental and Occupational Health Unit within the Department of Public Health for the School of Healthcare Sciences at the Sefako Makgato Health Services University, speaking to us on the line. On the move, coming up with Palesa and Benjamin. What do we have for us today besides the gender-based violence feature that we have on Mondays?
Good morning. How are you guys doing?
We are. I'm fabulous.
Okay, good. I'm glad. Well, today on the Move, we're going to be starting a campaign just as the On the Move team. October is African Pride Month. In fact, in October 1990 was the first ever Pride parade in the African continent, which happened here in Johannesburg, South Africa. Yes.
Had to be.
So October is Pride Month, and we're going to be doing a series of Pride Month conversations on the Move, starting with this one today, which is gender and sexuality identity, helping people really understand the gender identity dynamics, the pronouns, and also how to not misgender people of the LGBTQI plus community.
It's quite fascinating.
Yeah.
Especially on our continent. I mean, this
course.
is not an easy subject culturally, but it's a real world that we live in.
Absolutely, it is. And then we're going to be wrapping up in our Money Matters feature after what we saw with David Mabuza, the late David Mabuza, and his family fighting over, disputes. That's not something new, and it's not just something for rich people. Disputes with money happen all the time when one passes in families, especially here on the African continent.
This is why wills are so important. And
They're
I don't
very
know
important.
that we're taking it that seriously, that one.
So today we're going to be finding out what a living annuity is.
Okay, that's coming up.
I'm fascinated by that.
And that's how we come to the end of this edition, this Tuesday, 7th of October's edition of Rise and Shine. I'm Asanda Beda.
And I'm Peter Ndoro. We're out. Up next is the news with Onele Nsitsi and the sports headlines with Mutsubudi Makura. Have an awesome day. Bye-bye.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Looking at your latest news this hour, your headlines: Sudan militia leader convicted of war crimes, and Tanzania's opposition Chadema party accuses police of wounding its supporters. Your latest news. Greetings to our listeners. The International Criminal Court has convicted the first junta weed militia leader put on trial for atrocities committed in Sudan's Darfur region more than 20 years ago. The court found Ali Muhammad al-Ramnan guilty of 27 counts of crimes against humanity and war crimes, including rape, murder, and persecution. His sentence will be determined at a later date after a new round of hearings. The conviction is the first and only trial looking at crimes in Sudan since the case was referred to the court by the United Nations Security Council in 2005.